from 16th July. The members have made and subscribed the oath of affirmation in my office. Order. Order. Honourable members, I wish to announce that in terms of Rule 319, Ms. M.T. Kubai has, with effect from the 24th July 2013, been designated as a parliamentary councillor to the Deputy President. This, of course, happened after a formal consultative process with the Deputy President. We will now come to notice of motion. Does any member wish to give notice of a motion? The ANC.
Thank you, Speaker. I move on behalf of the African National Congress that in its next sitting, the House debates creating an economic climate that will produce more entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. Thank you.
Noted. Does any other member wish to give notice of a motion? Kache, IFP.
Thank you, Speaker. I wish on behalf of the Inkatha Freedom Party shall move that at the next sitting of the House, that the House debate the importance of reviewing recruitment policy in the SAPS to eradicate corruption of the police officers. Thank you.
Noted. Does any other member wish to give notice of a motion? Honourable member.
Thank you, Speaker. I hereby move on behalf of the Democratic Alliance that this House debates the rising levels of unemployment among the youth and to find solutions thereto. Thank you.
Noted. Does any other member wish to give notice of a motion? Yes. Honourable member.
Thank you, Speaker. I hereby move on behalf of the Democratic Alliance that this House debates the worrying level of runway incursion incidents at some of our airports and considers possible solutions thereto.
Noted. Does any other member wish to give notice of a motion?
Honourable Speaker, on behalf of the Inkatha Freedom Party, I shall move at the next sitting of this House that this House debate the challenges of the living conditions faced by rural women.
Noted. Does any other member wish to give notice of a motion? Honourable member.
Thank you, Speaker. I move on behalf of African National Congress that in its next sitting, the House debates increasing sporting facilities in rural areas and townships. Thank you, Speaker.
Noted. Does any other member wish to give notice of a motion? Yes, Honourable member.
Honourable Speaker, I move on behalf of the ANC that in its next sitting, the House debates measures to ensure large-scale investment in the productive sectors of the economy. I thank you.
Noted. Does any other member wish to give notice of a motion? Right at the back, Honourable member.
Thank you, Speaker. I move without notice that this House in its next sitting debates the whole issue of peacefully returning all stolen land to the rightful heirs by those handed same by their grandparents, land grabbers of yesteryear. I thank you.
Noted. Does any other member wish to give notice of a motion? Honourable member at the back.
I move on behalf of the ANC that in its next sitting, the House debates public investment to create and maintain strategic economic and social infrastructure. Thank you.
Noted. Does any other member wish to give notice of a motion? Honourable member right at the back.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I move on behalf of the ANC that in the next sitting in the House debates assessing the private financial sector's contributions to the investment and the development goals of the country. I thank you, Speaker.
Noted. Does any other member wish to give notice of a motion? That doesn't appear to be the case. We then move on. We now come to motions without notice. Are there any motions without notice? Chief Whip of the Majority Party.
Honourable Speaker, I move without notice that the Chief Whip of Majority Party, the House notes that Saturday, 17 August 1913, two of the country's sporting codes, soccer and rugby, came together during the Nelson Mandela Sports and Cultural Day event at FNB Stadium. Further notes that on this day and on the same pitch, both Bafana Bafana and Springboks played and won their games. Recalls that Bafana Bafana scored a goal in each half to beat Burkina Faso 2-0, and the Springboks ensured it was a day for South Africa to remember as they thrashed Argentina 73-13. Further recalls that more than 50,000 fans turned up at FNB Stadium to honor Madiba, who once famously said, "Sport has the power to change the world, power to inspire, and power to unite people in a way that little else does," close quotes. Acknowledges that this was a wonderful day as many South Africans came together to celebrate the event held as part of the celebrations of Nelson Mandela's 95th birthday, and congratulates the organizers for this remarkable event, which is a fitting testament to the icon in whose name the challenge was played. I so move.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections are agreed to. Are there any other motions without notice? Chief.
Thank you, Honourable
Of the
Speaker.
opposition.
I move without notice on behalf of the Democratic Alliance that the House notes that Square Kilometre Array SKA team comprising of Tracy Cheetham, the General Manager Infrastructure and Site Operation, Kim de Boer, General Manager People Support and Development, Communication and Project Secretariat, Willem Esterhuizen, Meerkat Project Manager, Dr. Bernard Farnhoff, Project Director, and Dr. Adrian Tiplady, SKA Site Bid Manager, was presented with the NSTF BHP Bulletin Award for an individual or team for outstanding contribution to science, engineering, technology and innovation through management and related activities over the last 5 to 10 years. Recognizes these remarkable individuals' contributions to the SKA project and securing South Africa's role as a major partner in the project. Further notes the potential the SKA project has to advance and promote South Africa's contribution to humanity's advancement through science and technology. Also recognizes the importance of science and technology in the quest to uplift and empower our people, building a knowledge-based economy on the African continent, and therefore congratulates the entire SKA team on its prestigious award and wish them well in taking the SKA project forward. I so move.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections agreed to. Are there any further motions? Without notice, Honourable Member, IFP.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker. I hereby move without notice that the House congratulate Ms. Bridget van Aswegen on her outstanding achievement in winning first place in the Women's Stand-Up Paddleboarding World Championships in Hawaii in July. Salutes her courage and resolve in attempting what is arguably known as one of the most treacherous sea crossings in the world. Notes that she completed the arduous 55-kilometre race in first place in a time of 8 hours and 55 minutes, recognizes that Ms. van Aswegen is an extremely talented South African sportswoman and ambassador for women's sports in South Africa and the world, and applauds her success and the inspirational role she provides to all South Africans. I so move.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections agreed to. Are there any further motions without notice? That doesn't appear to be the case.
Speaker,
Oh, Chief Whip of the Majority Party, sorry.
I move without notice that the House notes that on Friday, 9 August 2013, the Muslim community all over the world celebrated Eid Mubarak following 29 days of fasting. Further notes that Eid is the festival marking the end of the holy month of Ramadan, during which Muslims are obligated to stay without food or drink from sunrise to sunset through the month. Acknowledges that the period of fasting is regarded as the time of deep introspection, which strengthens the bonds of family and community. Further acknowledges that during the month of Ramadan, Muslims work extra by spending more time in Ibadah and the prayers than the other days, and reciting and trying to understand the Quran and following the teachings of the Prophet, and extends our warmest wishes to the Muslim community in South Africa and around the world on their Eid Mubarak and a successful month of Ramadan, which has been a test to their endurance and patience. I so move.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections are agreed to. Are there any further motions without notice? Doesn't appear to be the case. The first item on the order paper is a motion in the name of the Chief Whip of the Majority Party, the Honorable the Chief Whip.
Mr. Speaker, I don't want to read the wrong one. It's yours. I want to move the motion. No, this is wrong. That the House notes with deep sadness the passing of former Chief Justice of the Republic of South Africa, Justice Pius Langa, on Wednesday, the 24th of July, 2013, at Milpark Hospital in Johannesburg. Further notes that he had been in hospital for about a month following a long illness. Remembers that Justice Langa was among the first judges selected for the Constitutional Court, established in 1994 under the country's first democratic constitution, and was appointed Chief Justice of the Republic of South Africa in 2005. Further remembers that before he served in the Constitutional Court, he served the Department of Justice for 17 years, became an advocate of the Supreme Court of South Africa in 1977, I beg your pardon, and was appointed to the bench by former President Nelson Mandela in 1994. Recalls that in the recognition of his exceptional service in law, constitutional jurisprudence and human rights, on the 22nd of April 2008, the order of the Councillor of the Baobab in gold was bestowed on Justice Langa by the former President Thabo Mbeki. Believes that South Africa has lost one of its best legal minds, a dedicated human rights jurist and a veteran struggle activist, and conveys its heartfelt condolences to the Langa family, his colleagues and friends on the loss of this pioneer of the judicial system. I so move.
Thank you. I now wish to invite the Honorable the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development. The Honorable the Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy President, members of this august assembly. I'm not using the crude vice of name dropping to claim any association closer to the Langa family than others. I had the opportunity to raise some issues of a judicial nature when I had the unenviable task of addressing both the memorial service and the funeral. I'm neither hogging the platform nor having a second bite at the cherry, as it were, in paying tribute to this gallant fighter for justice. Having learned of his passing on, the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development immediately got seized with some of the preparatory work with regards to the memorial service and the funeral that took place in Durban. In doing all this, we were certain that it could not eliminate the grief by his loved ones, but to honor his impeccable legacy, a true son of the soil. Our work towards supporting the Langa family as the department was made possible by the President declaring the funeral of the late Chief Justice formally a special official funeral. Once again, would like to thank the Honorable President for the declaration, as that duly recognized the pivotal role the late Chief Justice played in shaping our early democratic jurisprudence. It was indeed a gesture befitting of a jurist who immensely contributed to our democratic transformation in addition to our jurisprudential maturity. I feel the accolades will be incomplete if Chief Justice Langa was packaged in a one-dimensional judicial or legal framework. He was an amazing person at a personal level, and I use myself as an example of his less known side of life that some members of his family. Chief Justice Langa grew up in apartheid South Africa, and his life was shaped by the encounters that he and his generation had to endure at the hands of racial supremacy. He pulled himself through the odious journey of distance education and climbed from the lowest ranks of the judiciary to the highest. 35 years of an arduous journey from the shirt maker to a court clerk, a messenger, and ultimately to a Chief Justice is the triumph of the human spirit over adversity. He was the irrepressible spirit reminiscent of our people's resolve to triumph over the system of apartheid. Born in 1939 in Bushbuck Ridge, when the clouds of war were gathering in Europe, Chief Justice Langa grew during those trying times of the biggest black miners' workers' strike of 1946, the ascension to power of the apartheid government in 1948, the defiant mood of the Defiance Campaign of 1952, the Freedom Charter of 1955, the Women's March on the Union Building in 1956, the Sharpeville Massacre of 1960, the Soweto Rebellion of 1976, and many, many other events that shaped his life as a human rights activist as well as a lawyer. It was therefore logical that when the Constitutional Court was established, Justice Langa was appointed with 10 others as the first judges of the new court by President Mandela. He became its deputy president in August 1997, and in November 2001 assumed the position of Deputy Chief Justice of the Republic of South Africa. He was appointed the country's Chief Justice and head of our Constitutional Court with effect from June 2005, and he retired in October 2009. He was also instrumental in the formation of the Democratic Lawyers Association, and through his contributions with other activist lawyers of that time. This association graduated to the National Democratic Lawyers Association, NADEL, which he served as president from 1988 till 1994. I had the pleasure to be part of this structure as the project's coordinator in KwaZulu-Natal when I came out of jail in 1990. Justice Langa also served in the structures of the United Democratic Front. I have therefore all the right to refer to him as Comrade Pious. Justice Langa was amongst those who took the risk at the instruction of his organization to pioneer groundwork requisite to ensure the post-1990 negotiated settlement. It was with a sigh of relief that common ground was found and a South Africa for all was carefully but painstakingly negotiated at the talks about talks, the Grotescuur and Pretoria minutes, which paved the way for the first democratic elections. He participated in all these negotiations. He left this world a better place. None other than Langa himself assisted with the other states to fine-tune their own constitutions when he sat at the Constitutional Review Committee of Zimbabwe, in Rwanda, Tanzania, as a Commonwealth envoy to the democratization of the island of Fiji, playing a pivotal role in the Lesotho elections for the Southern African Development Community, SADC, as a member of the Police Board on the transformation of the police, the review of health legislation, and the list is endless. As a chair of the Judicial Service Commission, he highlighted the issue of transformation of the judiciary to represent the demographics of our country. The current JSC is continuing with this task, even though we know that there are forces that seek to reverse the gains that have been made since the late Chief Justice's time. Mr. Speaker, the late Chief Justice was not known for fearing uncharted territory. In trying to bring customary law within the fold of our Constitution, he made a groundbreaking judgment in the case of Bear and others versus Khayelitsha magistrates and others. Citing the flexibility of our judicial system, he sought to bring customary law closer to our Constitution, decrying as he did that the positive aspects of our customary law had been neglected in our law. As an outstanding member of the African National Congress, the ANC, in his own right, he could have chosen to turn a blind eye to some of his government's own mistakes. However, he chose to speak truth to power, giving his own party and government the responsibility to uphold the values of the Constitution and leading by example. I was glad to hear from the Deputy Chief Justice, Dikgang Moseneke, that a book on Chief Justice Langa's seminal judgments and opinions in the matters of law will be off the press early next year. But I wish to issue a challenge to biographers to also catalogue the life of such achievements as Pius Langa's as an additional memory for posterity. I have no issue with the quality of biographies on our shelves, but it would be literary sacrilege if Pius Langa's does not become the most sought after biographies of recent times. Honorable members, as a country, we should be very proud to have had in our midst a humble giant whose indelible legacy will definitely inspire generations to come. We have the confidence that today, Chief Justice Langa has rejoined his equally outstanding wife, Thandekile, in eternal peace. Mr. Speaker, and all those of the Langa family, the whole justice family, the legal professions, and indeed all South Africans have lost one of our greatest sons. Akwehlanga lungehlanga, hamba kahle sothole, sodumase, Matevu aqabula inkomishi, nyongo yendlovu, Gubazi, Mlindeli, Somaphunga. Ngiyabonga.
I thank the Honourable Minister. And I wish to invite the Honourable Leader of the Opposition to the podium.
Mr. Speaker, honourable members, I stand here this afternoon in humble admiration of a mighty man. It is with deep sadness that we mourn the loss of former Chief Justice Pius Langa almost a month ago. He was not only a great jurist, but one of the founding fathers of our constitutional democracy. His legacy will always reflect the best and the worst of South Africa's golden era at the dawn of our democracy, a time of hope and rebirth. Much like his first name, which rings true to his nature, the word pious also means devout, sincere, and moral. Words which not only describe the type of man that he was, but also the association that we as a nation have with the era when men and women like him were the custodians of our constitutional democracy. Chief Justice Langa was devoted to building a new, free, and fair nation. He wanted sincerely to create a just society for all South Africans. It is appropriate that those who worked with him have said that he always stated plainly, "We must do what is right." Born in 1939, Pius Nkonzo Langa's life was a timeline which represented the best and the worst of South Africa's history. He left school at the age of 14 and went to work in a clothing factory. This was the life the apartheid government would have him lead, an incomplete education and work as a manual laborer. But through sheer force of endeavor, Chief Justice Langa continued to study. He completed matric on his own outside the walls of the classroom. His passion for upholding justice and his desire to serve the people led him to a career in the law. He gained his degree by correspondence and in 1977 was admitted as an advocate of the Supreme Court. He defended activists, trade unions, and masterfully fought the apartheid machine from the inside out. When we think of the journey to this point in his life, we see that Chief Justice Langa possessed that potent combination of supreme intelligence and deep diligence. Augmented by a moral compass that pointed true north, he was a man who single-handedly forced cracks in the apartheid system. His appointment as one of the first judges to the highest court in the land was a significant achievement, evidence of the accomplishments of his career and of his humanity. But it was his term first as a judge and later as Chief Justice for which he will be remembered most. His contribution to our jurisprudence is something we can be proud of. He remained bound to his lifelong task of standing up for the weak in society, as witnessed in several of his most historical judgments. In the case of Government versus Grootboom in 2000, he ruled that citizens had the right to shelter from the state. He was part of the judgment which forced the government to provide treatment to HIV pregnant mothers. He stood up for women's rights, being part of both the Carmichael judgment, which held the state had a duty to protect women from sexual violence, and the Baloyi judgment, which ruled that the state has a duty to provide effective remedies against domestic violence. Pius Langa spent his life striving for the continual improvement of all his fellow citizens. 3 years ago, he spoke of his retirement as the Chief Justice of the Constitutional Court. He spoke of taking off his robes and how he became aware. He thought of the words of a dying man, so much to do, so little done. This was a man for whom retirement did not mean his work was done. He did not sit back and think of his triumph over adversity or of the prestige of his achievements. He thought of what still must be done. Almost all of us in this house today had the honor and the privilege of being sworn into office by Chief Justice Langa in 2009. Under his watch, we swore to be faithful to the Republic of South Africa and to obey, respect, and uphold the Constitution and all other law of the Republic. We can only hope that in the almost 5 years since we took this oath, we have been equal to that pledge. Lala ngoxolo, Chief Justice Langa. Umndeni wako sithi agwehlanga lungehlanga. Lalani ngenxeba nina bakwaLanga. Thank you.
Thank the Honourable Speaker. I now wish to invite the Honourable MGP Likota to the podium.
Mr. Speaker, honorable members, Chief Justice Pius Langa was to the judiciary what Nelson Mandela was to the executive, a visionary, passionate and articulate champion of our Constitution. In paying tribute to this extraordinary jurist, who is no more, it is fitting that this august House focuses on his call of the 9th of October 2006 at Stellenbosch for transformative constitutionalism. No nation can pay a greater tribute to a true servant of the people than to carry forward his or her legacy. Pius certainly deserves this, but that token to have his ideas on transformative constitutionalism live amongst us until it is realized. The Constitution, he pointed out, should serve as a historic bridge between the parts of a deeply divided society, characterized by strife, conflict, untold suffering and injustice, and a future founded on the recognition of human rights, democracy and peaceful coexistence and development opportunities for all South Africans, irrespective of color, race, class, belief, or sex. In his mind, the building of a new society based on substantive equality was the appointed task of all of us in the legislature, the executive, as well as the judiciary. Equality in itself is important. Substantive equality, however, is what we are required to achieve to level the playing fields. Till then, we are stuck more or less where we were before 1994. Transformation of the type he had in mind entailed a social as well as an economic revolution, and no less. Only then will the economic playing fields be made level. Only then will transformative constitutionalism have materialized. The Constitution is our nation's strength. The accord we achieved as diverse people lives in the Constitution. The society we build must therefore have its foundation in the Constitution. Pius Langa understood this, as did the courts of our land that he so ably led. It is no accident that those whom we hold in the highest esteem in society are indeed those who esteemed the Constitution most highly. And Pius Langa was just such a man. He was a founder member of the National Association of Democratic Lawyers and his president in 1988. We served together in the United Democratic Front. Power did not change him. It only intensified his desire to give to society the justice and transformation it yearned for and merited after centuries of injustice. He lived by his principles, and the legacy he leaves behind us is deserving of our ownership. Pius could speak to any person in our country in his or her own language. Former Constitutional Court Justice Johan Krichler was astonished at his ability, but Pius Langa knew how to speak with each of them in their own tongue, and more importantly, how to speak up to them. Starting as a factory worker, becoming a court interpreter clerk, he rose to become Chief Justice, answered his own aspirations in this way, as well as those of the nation. He fused what he wanted for himself with what the nation also wanted. He had a very profound understanding of our society. Perhaps the fact that he had been an interpreter clerk, daily seeing the suffering of his own people in the rule at the hands of the apartheid regime, must have exposed him very deeply and profoundly to the people that he needed to lead and to help take forward. Therefore, today we can with one voice hail his achievements, with one heart mourn his passing, and with one understanding recognize the inescapable imperative to seek substantive equality through transformative constitutionalism. To his bereaved children, family, friends, and colleagues, we offer our condolences, but also our gratitude for his life's work, his great integrity, and his shining example. Hambaga Ashe, trusted comrades, wise counselor, great spirit, you enriched us, guided us, and protected us. May your rewards be commensurate with what you did for us, and may God let your spirit rest in peace. Thank you.
I thank the honourable member. I now recognize Honourable Team Simang. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Today, South Africa remembers one of its most valiant and honourable sons, former Chief Justice Pius Langa. The former Chief Justice was an exemplar of the will to good, truth, fairness, human rights for all, as well as a courageous struggle stalwart. Pius Langa was a self-accomplished and highly acclaimed legislator. He began his legal career as a messenger in the Department of Justice in 1960 and rose steadily through the legal ranks, finally retiring at the pinnacle of law as Chief Justice of South Africa. He was internationally acclaimed, a promoter of democracy. The former Chief Justice is an inspiration to all South Africans. We all owe him a great debt of gratitude. On behalf of the Inkatha Freedom Party, I wish to say thank you, Pius, for always demonstrating the purest form of a judicial conscience, for fearlessly protecting the independence of the judiciary, for dauntlessly protecting the values enshrined in our Constitution, for being an outstanding example of a dignified and dedicated jurist. hamba kahle qhawe lomzabalazo. Kwabomndeni wakhe wakwaLanga sithi akwehlanga lungehlanga. Ngiyathokoza.
I thank the honourable member, and I wish to invite the Honourable Ntapane to the podium.
Mr. Speaker, honourable members, on behalf of UDM, I would like to extend our heartfelt condolence to the family, friends, and ex-colleagues of late Chief Justice Pius Langa, who died at the age of 74 on the 24th of July, 2013. I indeed confirm what many speakers who came before me have already said, that the death of Chief Justice Pius Langa robbed South Africa of a great legal mind. Chief Justice Pius Langa played a crucial role in helping to establish, stabilize, and solidify our constitutional democracy. He was very committed to human rights, equality, and justice. He worked very hard to transform our justice system and to ensure its independence. In his tribute to the late Chief Justice Pius Langa, the United Democratic Movement President Bandu Holomisa said, and I quote, "His humble beginnings in Bushbuck Ridge and at some point working at a factory should inspire young South Africans to work hard because it is possible to achieve greatness," close quotes. Once more, Mr. Speaker, especially to his family, we are very sorry for your loss. Chief Justice Pius Langa was a great man. He will live in our memories forever. May his soul rest in peace. Thank you, Honourable Chairperson.
I thank the honourable member, and I wish to invite the Honourable Mulder to the podium.
Geachte speaker, geachte adjunct president, geachte collega's lede van die parlement. Voormalige hoofregter Pius Langa het 'n lang pad geloop deur sy loopbaan, en ek dink die groot rede vir sy sukses was geweest dat hy was nie 'n aanstelling of iemand wat van bo af ingeforseer was in 'n pos nie. Hy het deur die jare deur die ranks gekom, as ek dit so mag stel. Dit is so dat hy in 1994 deel was van die eerste groep van regters wat aangestel was in die grondwetlike hof, en hy dadelik daar sy stempel afgedruk. In 2005 is hy aangestel as hoofregter, en op 'n persoonlike vlak het ek die voorreg gehad om vir 3 jaar lank wat ek 'n lid was van die regtelike dienskommissie, die Judicial Services Commission, wat nie 'n maklike kommissie is nie. Dit is 'n kommissie waar dit soms warm gaan, waar dit soms moeilik gaan, maar kon ek onder sy voorsitterskap deel wees van daardie kommissie en sien hoe hy op sy bekwame, rustige manier daar orde handhaaf en die werk gedoen kry. Vir 17 jaar lank was hy 'n lid van die Departement Justisie, het hy gewerk voor 1994, waar hy ook sy bydrae gemaak het van die onderste vlak af en hom opgewerk het tot in die hoogste pos in ons regspleging. Die Vryheidsfront Plus wil graag ons opregte simpatie en meelewing betuig met sy familie, met sy gesin, met sy naasbestaandes, wat ook 'n pa en 'n oupa verloor het. Ons opregte meelewing met hulle en ook aan almal wat met hom te doen gehad het, met hom saamgewerk het, mag die krag vind in hierdie tyd om aan te gaan. Baie dankie.
I thank the honourable member, and I wish to invite the Honourable Swart.
Speaker, the ACDP learnt with great sadness of the death of former Chief Justice Pius Langa, and we'd like to again convey our sincere condolences to his family and friends. As other speakers have pointed out, he was one of the first judges appointed to our Constitutional Court after 1994 and was the Chief Justice from 2005 until his retirement in 2009. He played a crucial role in laying the foundations of our young constitutional democracy and continued to promote the independence of the judiciary as one of the main cornerstones of our democracy. During his term on the court, as well as after his retirement, he worked tirelessly to build a non-racist, non-sexist and just society founded on the values of human dignity and equality as set out in the Constitution and the rule of law. I had the first-hand experience of Chief Justice Langa's vast experience and sharp intellect during the groundbreaking certification case before the Constitutional Court over a number of weeks in 1995. I also had many occasions to interact with him on the Justice Portfolio Committee when we met with him and when he discussed matters of legal concern, and he was chiefly often concerned about access to justice. I always found him to be extremely courteous, but also very concerned and firm on those issues which were of a concern to him. He also presided over a very important case involving the ACDP's right to contest the 2006 local government elections in Cape Town. This was an extraordinary case as the court agreed to sit after hours on an urgent basis and found in our favor, again delivering a very urgent judgment. This just showed his commitment and those other judges of the Constitutional Court to uphold justice. And this judgment is widely used to assist political parties when the Electoral Commission does not allow them to contest elections for administrative reasons. I joked with him a while later after that judgment when he was in Parliament with the Justice Portfolio Committee that I was preparing our next urgent application, but he good-naturedly appreciated that jest and welcomed our further application. His daughter Pumzile Langa said at his funeral in Durban that he was a generous man. He loved each and every one of us. We were blessed to have him, she said. She described her father as a private man who loved to dance and sing. He was one we ran to since our mother passed away. We felt safe with him. He was the one who loved us. She said she was thankful that God had blessed the family with him. We in the ACDP are thankful that God blessed us in the nation with such a Chief Justice who leaves a rich legacy as a constitutional jurist for generations to come. Our prayers are with his family and friends during this time of bereavement. May his soul rest in peace. I thank you.
I thank the honourable member. Honourable Mfundisi, you have the floor, sir.
Honourable Speaker and honourable members, the life of former Chief Justice Langa is surely a life well lived. The generosity that his children speak of does not only relate to his family, but relates to all South Africans. His contribution to our justice system gave us so much more that we could ask ever for more. He indeed served selflessly with his intellect and knowledge. The late Chief Justice Langa is the epitome of the truth in the saying, some are born great, some achieve greatness. He achieved the greatness. That he founded the National Association of Democratic Lawyers speaks volumes of his understanding of democracy and the intricate role that the legal fraternity must play in fully establishing a just democratic society. We shall forever be grateful for his massive contribution to the drafting of the Constitution in which we pride ourselves. His life story is an inspirational one, worth being told over and over again, especially to our children. The fact that he worked as a factory worker before he went on to study law shows that dreams come true when the dreamer does not lose focus on a bigger picture. His life testifies that it is possible to reach the highest height of one's potential even if they started at the bottom. With no doubt, he was a great legal mind, and it is inspiring to know that he started as a court interpreter in the legal field and progressed deservedly to head the highest court of our land. May his legacy continue to inspire generations. From the UCDP, we send our condolences to his family, the legal fraternity, and all South Africans. May his soul rest in peace.
I thank the honourable member, and I wish to invite Honourable Petty, who will be making his maiden speech. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. The life of Justice Pius Langa taught us that one should live with purpose and to add value, to make a difference. He dedicated his life to the country at large. Azania lost one of its giants who contributed to the justice system without reservations. His way of living generates two important leadership attributes of leadership, which are courage and humility. Justice Langa contributed to triple S. He served, he suffered, he sacrificed to our country, Azania. Let us follow his examples. May his soul rest in peace. I thank you.
I thank the honourable member. Honourable members, the noise level in the House is too high. We are trying to listen to the motions of condolences, not the noise. I now wish to invite the Honourable Smuts to the podium.
Mr. Speaker, I found the official funeral service for the late Chief Justice Pius Langa a profound experience, even watching from afar. It put on most magnificent display the fact that a new legal order has been firmly established in under 2 decades. The oratory of 2 Chief Justices, the former and the present, played no small part in that demonstration. But I think it was the character of our departed Chief Justice that imbued the entire proceedings with an historical dimension. His life story and career path, from clerk and interpreter to Chief Justice, now well recited, is itself the story of the legal transition. Pious by name and pious by nature, his second name, Konzo, meant prayerful or pious, as Deputy CJ Moseneke has written. Pious by name, pious by nature. He also brought to his role the patience, which is one of the fruits of the Spirit, and the humanity which the concept of Ubuntu encapsulates. It is appropriate that we, as the legislative branch, should consider his legacy as we continue the work of the legal transition. Firstly, let us be sure to take forward the work that Judge Langa and Judge Chaskelson did together on an appropriate model for the office of the Chief Justice and the independent administrative agency for the courts, which the Justice Minister will table in due course. That work will complete the changes we have already legislated in the Constitution's 17th Amendment and the Superior Courts Acts. Secondly, as we work on the Legal Practice Bill, let us remember the indispensable role of the independent advocate, who will take politically and socially unpopular cases and who is able to take them precisely because he is independent. Pius Langa was such an advocate through the dark days before the transition and even during dark hours after the new dawn had broken. There is a third area of work which we should commemorate, and that is the freedom of expression. Judge Langa gave seminal classic free speech judgments in Islamic Unity Convention and in Derek. He was also instrumental in helping SANEF and Print Media South Africa to ward off the prospect of a media appeals tribunal by chairing the Press Freedom Commission, especially created by those bodies. Typically, he said in his foreword that although the media fulfills a critical role, I quote, it does not operate in a vacuum. The manner in which it goes about its work will always be of interest to the greater public. This is so because the media concerns people, is about people. It is about how their lives are touched. Regulation, he said, will accordingly always be of interest, particularly in a democratic constitutional state that espouses the values of human dignity, equality, and freedom. Now, sir, the architecture that he proposed for the new press bodies, based on co-regulation by the public and the press, was not, in fact, exactly what they adopted. I don't think he liked that. I think there must have been many occasions over the years when his displeasure or his anger was provoked. But it is all the more remarkable, therefore, that imperturbability sat on him like patience on a monument. But then patience is among the fruits of the Spirit. Mr. Speaker, Mrs. Beauty Langa predeceased the Chief Justice. We extend our condolences to their children and also to the judge's surviving siblings, including Mr. Mandela Langa, once chairperson of ICASA. It cannot be an accident that 2 gentlemen with such apparently natural grace and self-possession in leadership came from one family. I say again what I said to Mandela years ago, not once but more than once. Thank God too for their parents, Mr. and Mrs. Langa.
I thank the honourable member. Our last speaker will be the Honourable Pule. You have the floor, sir.
Mr. Speaker, there are many sorrows in life. And indeed, one of the greatest sorrows that no one would like to experience is the sorrow of death. It is with this great sorrow and sadness we mourn the death of a truly great, world-class, impeccable leader born from humble beginnings. Let me, on behalf of the Minority Front, extend our deepest heartfelt condolences to the family, legal fraternity, and the friends of our beloved former Chief Justice Langa, whose death indeed is a great loss for our country. Undoubtedly, he leaves behind a legacy amongst all South Africans and the world, infused with honesty, integrity, dignity, and above all, hard work. His in-depth knowledge, indescribable determination, and immeasurable commitment ensured justice was not preferential, but was delivered to all fairly, including minority communities, to make our country a better place for all. He was a great role model and a lesson for young people that it is hard work and commitment that takes you forward and not shortcuts. One of his amazing characteristics was he put his legal expertise to good use to rid this country of institutional racism and apartheid colonialism. He was a good and competent lawyer that took efforts and pain to really achieve, and a great political activist, not only him, but his entire family. His brother Ben Langa was assassinated by an agent of the state. So the agent of the state used the ANC people to kill an ANC person. President Jacob Zuma and Oliver Tambo had to go and explain to the family and apologize for it. How many people or families would have been able to deal with an issue like this? To understand what went wrong, what happened, but not deflect themselves from their commitments from the greater good of the struggle in the country. This shows a very great depth of character, not only of Justice Langa, but of his entire family. His work in crafting the Constitution was quite visionary, together with other great giants. The high-quality judgments that he wrote contributed in setting a firm foundation for the constitutional courts, which is taught by universities and academics all over the world. He upheld a very dignified decorum of the constitutional courts and commanded undoubtedly great respect. Even after he retired, he was still involved in the media tribunal of the South African National Editors Forum, advancing our country to greater heights. To his family, we pray that in this time of loss, you'll find God's love much more, and that you'll find your effort comfort in his presence of the Lord. We pray that God pours upon you his sweet, amazing grace and overflow your hearts with peace as you live in his abeyance. To the former Chief Justice, a great soul serves everyone all the time. A great soul never dies. It brings us together again and again. As today all Hindus celebrate Raksha Bandhan, a prayer of bond, love and security, let us be reminded of Gandhiji, who once said, "There are no goodbyes for us." Wherever Justice Langa is, you will always be in our hearts. May your soul rest in peace. Thank you.
I thank the honourable member. That concludes the speaker's list on this matter. I take it that there are no objections to the motion being adopted. No objections are agreed to. Will members please rise to observe a moment of silence in memory of the former Chief Justice Pius Langa. Please be seated. The presiding officers associate themselves with the motion. The condolences of the House will be conveyed to the Langa family. The second motion on the order paper is also in the name of the Chief Whip of the Majority Party, the Honorable Chief Whip.
Honourable Speaker, I move that notwithstanding Rule 29, subsection 8, and Rule 113, subsection 1, questions not be given precedence tomorrow. I so move.
Thank you. I now put the motion. Are there any objections? No objections. Agreed to. Honorable members, on Tuesday, the 18th of June 2013, I delivered a ruling on remarks made on the 12th of June 2013 by the Honorable R.B. Pule during the debate on vote number 1, the vote on the presidency. Notwithstanding Honorable Pule's absence from the House at the time, the Honorable Member had accused Honorable Kalyan of being complicit in her party's alleged racism and of not acting in a professional manner, but rather like a clown and a mascot. I ruled then that those remarks were out of order, and I specifically indicated in my ruling that Honorable Pule would be asked to withdraw his remarks once he was present in the House. I am informed that Honorable Pule is indeed in the House today. And I therefore direct him to withdraw his remarks. Honorable Pule.
Mr. Speaker, indeed, I recall calling the Honorable Kalyan a clown and a mascot, and I withdraw.
Order, order. Order, order, honorable members, order. Honorable members, on Tuesday, the 18th of June 2013, during the first reading debate on the appropriations bill, a point of order was raised when Honorable Yengeni made her speech on the bill. The Deputy Chief Whip of the DA, Honorable Kalyan, rose on a point of order that the member at the podium had accused the leader of the DA of deliberately misleading the nation and that the expression was unparliamentary. My preliminary ruling was that the leader of the DA was not a member of this House, however, undertook to study the Hansard and return to the House with a considered ruling. Having had an opportunity to study the unrevised Hansard, I wish to rule as follows. According to the unrevised Hansard, the Honorable Yengeni said, and I quote, "The DA of Premier Zille is deliberately misleading the nation with unfounded lies," close quote. Honorable Yengeni was referring to the party of Premier Zille as misleading the nation. Previous rulings on unparliamentary language have held that remarks that would have been regarded as unparliamentary against members of the House were not unparliamentary if made against a political party or people who are not members of this House. The same principle is applicable to Honorable Yengeni's reference to the party. It is the point of view of the Honourable Member and not unparliamentary. I now wish to move on. The next item on the order paper is member statements. Does any member of the ANC wish to make a statement?
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. The African National Congress welcomed the outcome of the 20 by-election held in the Eastern Cape, KwaZulu-Natal, Mpumalanga, Northwest, and Western Cape on the 7th August 2013. Of the 20 wards contested, the African National Congress has retained 15. People have still shown support of the ANC in all provinces. In many wards where former ANC councillors have contested the election as independent, ANC emerged victorious. ANC has silenced those who want to win council using unscrupulous backdoor methods by consciously undermining the voice of the electorate. We hope that council will focus their energies on work at hand, which is service delivery. Councillors play a very central role, which require identification of community needs, setting objectives to meet those needs, establishing priority between competing demand and allocating resources. However, we are concerned by the delayed by-election of Ward 22 of Abakulusi municipality in the town of Freehate municipality in KwaZulu-Natal. This matter must be put to rest so that people of that ward can have their representative. We also sent our...
Remember, your time has expired.
Thank you.
The DA.
Honorable Speaker, on the nomination of Musi Maimane as the DA Premier candidate for Gauteng, we noted how the cadres at Lutuli House smirked at his nomination. Need I remind this House that not so long ago, the same cadres laughed at the DA's bid to govern the Western Cape. The DA has publicly announced the candidate for Premier for Gauteng, but the ANC remains silent on theirs. In the meantime, DA Premier candidate Musi Maimane will campaign tirelessly in every corner and street in Gauteng. Musi Maimane will bring to the people of Gauteng the DA vision to establish an open opportunity society for all. The DA-led Gauteng government will establish an environment that will extend opportunities, that will empower people to secure jobs, that will improve their lives. Under Musi Maimane's leadership, the DA will form a government that is focused on clean governance that prioritizes the people, not the politicians. Under the DA administration, Gauteng will become a place where services are delivered, where corruption is the exception, not the rule, a place where young people have job opportunities they will need to make a success of their lives. I thank you.
Honourable Speaker, the community of Manenberg finds itself under siege yet again. Good, decent families are forced to cower while criminals brazenly go about their business. The community of Guguletu is constantly disturbed by the sound of gunfire coming from Manenberg. They too cower as they don't know what to expect. 2 communities held hostage by gangsterism. The question is simple. What does the government intend to do to stop this plague of violence? How many more sleepless nights are the people of both Manenberg and Guguletu and other surrounding areas have to endure before meaningful action is taken by the government? The children's parks are no-go areas except for drug addicts and their dealers. 14 schools in the area had to be temporarily closed for the mere reason: how does a teacher raise their voice over the gang calls? How does a learner learn when they are forced to cower in the corner as bullets fly over them? The teachers and the learners are not safe, but they could be. The Congress of the People is dismayed by the petty politicking of those in national government around the closure of 14 schools in the area, whilst not viewing the crisis of the people of Manenberg face daily. The President could call in the SANDF to patrol the area, as he did in Kaya Sands informal settlement in the northwest Johannesburg in 2010. If it could be implemented there, why not Manenberg? Or should the people of Manenberg feel like the President does not care about their plight? The Congress of the People calls on the President and the government to make decisive, meaningful intervention to stop this terror. I thank you.
The ANC. The ANC.
Honourable Speaker, in its election manifesto, the African National Congress identified 5 priorities for this term of office, and one of them was to reduce crime. In SAP's efforts to fight crime, we have been saddened by the statistics of our brave men and women in blue who are killed during their line of duty. We will never forget our heroes and heroines who have been dedicated their lives in their new struggle of crime-free South Africa. We would like to congratulate SAPS for successfully establishing the South African Police Service Education Trust, which is aimed at supporting the educational needs of children of our police members who died in the line of duty. Honourable Speaker, this is indeed a fulfillment of a promise which was made during 2010 commemoration ceremony, and ANC has delivered on its promises. This trust will ensure that we address another priority of our ANC-led government, which is education. We encourage the recipients of these bursaries to do us proud by excelling in their studies and by being responsible learners and students. The ANC congratulates all those recipients of these bursaries. Thank you.
The IFP.
Honorable Speaker, recently a Pietermaritzburg woman discovered that, according to Home Affairs, she has been married for the past 10 years to a man she has never met. She never lost her ID. This clearly shows that Home Affairs still has to do more in dealing with issues of corruption. The matter was reported and the department has not been helpful in providing a quick and effective solution to this problem. With the woman suffering through administrative incompetence of many Home Affairs offices, a mechanism must be in place to ensure that such incidents are dealt with swiftly instead of things taking months to happen, because this is an example of the seriousness of corruption within provincial offices of Home Affairs. Victims of fraud should not suffer due to the actions of certain corrupt Home Affairs officials. When individuals follow proper procedures in their quest to clear their names, there should be a quicker way to resolve these cases. The department should have a dedicated unit to investigate such cases and ensure that those involved with this type of fraud are identified and arrested and given lengthy jail terms. I thank you.
Freedom, FF Plus.
Agbare Speaker, die Seriti-kommissie van ondersoek na die wapenskandaal het sopas begin, waar getuies gelewer word oor die wapenaankope van die SANW. Die sukses van die ondersoek hang grootliks af van die getuienis wat gelewer word en die publiek wil hê dat getuies geloofwaardig moet wees. Om hierdie rede is getuieleiers aangestel vir die kommissie. Een van die getuieleiers is advokaat S. Lebala. Om geloofwaardigheid te verseker word verwag dat getuieleiers bo verdenking en eties onberuslik moet wees. Ongelukkig kan dit nie van advokaat Lebala gesê word nie. In 'n hofsaak in die Noord-Gautengse Hooggeregshof, waarin advokaat Lebala vir 'n respondent opgetree het, is bevind dat die respondent se prokureur myneed gepleeg het in terme van 'n verklaring en beveel die hof dat die prokureur deur die regsvereniging van die Noordelike Provinsie ondersoek moet word. In die hofsaak erken advokaat Lebala dat hy egter verantwoordelik was vir die opstel en die inhoud van die verklaring. In wese het advokaat Lebala dus myneed gepleeg. Dit is duidelik dat Lebala nie skroom om valse verklaringe van getuies op te stel nie. Hy is nie geskik om as 'n getuieleier vir die kommissie op te tree nie en moet dadelik verwyder word by die kommissie. Die Vryheidsfront Plus sal ook by die Balieraad versoek en 'n klag indien om advokaat Lebala te ondersoek, want in die verlede is sulke regsverteenwoordigers geskraap van die rol. Hy behoort ook geskraap te word as advokaat en doen die kommissie oneer aan.
The ANC.
Thank you, Speaker. The African National Congress commends the sterling work performed by Northwest government by distributing sanitary towels to 300 girl learners at 2 rural schools at Dryhas, near Taung region of Mompati District Municipality. It is a known factor that most women, especially on the outskirts of the country, resort to unhygienic practices just to survive the cycle, and more often than not, sanitary towels are a luxury for millions of women due to the high levels of poverty. We are certain that this intervention will contribute positively to the lives of our young girls. We are aware that some young girls miss a significant amount of school hours during the menstruation, largely because of the lack of modern sanitary products, and this contributes to lower attendance rates, eventually failure or dropping out. We call on all sectors of society to follow suit and reach out to young girls. Over the years, the ANC has mobilized and advocated for a caring society, and as the ANC working together, we can do more. Thank you.
APC. Not in the House. The DA.
Thank you, Chair. Over recent weeks, the situation in gang-infested areas in the Western Cape has escalated to such an extent that children and teachers can't go to school. It took a special intervention from the City of Cape Town Metro Police to ensure children were safe enough to go to school again yesterday. The death toll from gang-related violence in the last year is reaching the hundreds, yet the National Minister of Police continues to fail to address this crisis. The DA-run Western Cape Provincial Government has been asking this Minister of Police since last year to address this issue, but he has refused to cooperate. Has he forgotten that policing is a national competency and that he is responsible for policing across South Africa and not just in ANC-run provinces? In the last few years, the Western Cape government has attempted to implement various measures to curb violence in the Western Cape. Every single attempt has been blocked and undermined by Minister Mtetwa, who puts cheap politicking ahead of policing needs of the Western Cape. It is time for him to take action and re-establish the specialized gang and drug units. Anything less would be a dereliction of duty.
The ANC.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. The African National Congress welcomes the launch of a new 24-hour channel launched by the South African Broadcasting Corporation. This long-awaited channel will now add a new voice amongst the news channels by increasing diversity and giving voices to our citizens. This SABC platform should strengthen the public broadcaster by giving viewers news content that does not only reflect the diverse nature of South Africa and Africa, but also educate and inform viewers. We are confident that SABC leadership will make sure that this channel will be made available to the masses of our people. We are optimistic that this channel will be able to cover news across the length and breadth of our motherland and be the voice of the voiceless. Thank you.
Thank you. IFP.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The IFE calls on the National Commissioner, Rea Becher, to urgently investigate why convicted drug dealer Bakanatan Tini Mutli Paramutu and his family are still on the payroll almost 2 years after their dubious appointment as crime intelligence agents were uncovered. The fact that 2 years have been passed and his family is still paid salaries evidence corruption at the highest level, since they were implicated in corrupt activity linked to former crime intelligence head Richard Mdluli and his former chief financial officer Soli Razalus. Marimutu family should only be removed from their post, but also be ordered to pay back all the monies they have received over the past 2 years. It is clear that there are other links to these issues who authorize these payments. They must also be exposed, arrested, charged for their part in paying these salaries, and be arrested and prosecuted. Thank you.
Thank you. Cope.
Honorable Speaker, last week Friday was the Marikana massacre anniversary. It was the day on which the democratic government of the ANC decided that those who threatened the monopoly of their alliance should be ruthlessly annihilated. It is the sad day that the democratic government of the ANC decided that those who honestly demand a living wage were enemies of the revolution and therefore had to be executed. Honorable members, the absence of the government at the memorial service is clearly indicative of the arrogance of the ruling party. Their action is louder than words. Let those without ears see. The ANC says that they are the government of the ANC, by the ANC, for the ANC. They don't care for anybody other than those who agrees with them. Let those with ears hear and those with eyes see. The ANC is for the mine owners and COSATU unions, which takes cue from Luthuli House only. The question is, will the ANC do the same to NUMSA members who are now on strike? To the ANC, Marikana was not a tragedy, it was only a public relations inconvenience. What we are experiencing is a revolution betrayed by revolutionary rhetoric. The question is, will the ANC assure all South Africans that Marikana will never be repeated?
The ANC.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. The ANC welcomes the reinstatement
on a point of order.
A point of order has been raised. Yes, sir.
Mr. Speaker, on a point of order, the Honourable Khanare, in his statement, said that the ANC government had deliberately decided to eliminate people. Now, we assume that by government he meant the national executive as defined in the Constitution of the Republic. That national executive is made up of members of this House. He's implying that members of this House sat as a collective, as a constitutional structure, and took a decision to murder people. I would submit that that is unparliamentary.
Thank you very much. I'll study the answer and come back with the ruling. Certainly does sound unparliamentary to me, but I'll come back with a formal ruling. Order, members. The ANC.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. The ANC welcomes the reinstatement of sexual offences courts in South Africa, which will assist in stemming the wave of sexual crime against women and children. The return of courts specializing in sexual offence crimes aims to rein in violence against women in South Africa. Frequent incidents of rape and sexual assault have given South Africa one of the highest rates of sexual crime in the world. There is also substantial underreporting of such crimes, as the police and court processes are often unsympathetic that they constitute secondary trauma. Some magistrates have reportedly refused to try traumatic cases of rape, especially brutal child rape, because of the effect it has on them. A total of 57 courts will be established over the next 3 years. There is a budget for the appointment of special prosecutors, and some have already been trained. The reinstatement of courts will function through a specially trained officials and equipment, which will enable victims to identify the accused from a private testifying room when necessary. The court will also have a designated court clerk and a court preparatory program to help witnesses in preparing for appearances and to provide debriefing following testimony. These specialized courts would be centered on the needs of the victim, ensuring a prompt, effective court system that will reduce the chances of any one victim to experience a second abuse. Thank you, Speaker.
The DA.
The DA has been informed that the Department of Social Development embarked on a profiling exercise focusing only on the 9 wards in which by-elections will be held on the 18th of September. Officials from Klerksdorp, Wolmaranstad and Ventersdorp were instructed to work in Potchefstroom, but only in the by-election wards. Some of the officials approached the DA on an anonymous basis for fear of victimization. These officials were instructed that profiling must be completed before the by-elections in order for food parcels to be distributed exactly in the same way as before the 7th of August by-election in the Tlokwe Municipality Ward 9. It appears that the Minister Batabile Dlamini is unfazed about the public outcry about her abuse of state resources during this August by-election when she was involved in the distribution of 400 food parcels in Ward 9 at a ratio of 1 food parcel for every 2 ANC votes. The Minister should explain why officials from the Dr. Kenneth Kahuna district have been deployed into the ANC voting districts of the 9 wards to be contested during the 18th September by-elections. This action by the Minister may appear to be benevolent, but it is evident that all it is an attempt at vote rigging by stealth. Moreover, the voters recognize this behavior for what it is.
The ANC.
Somlom, on the 17th of August this year, the Orange Palm Electricity Forum held a leadership workshop with local community leaders to address challenges on electricity supply, with a particular focus on how to cooperate in addressing such problems. At the workshop, ESCOM explained to local leaders how electricity is supplied and impact of illegal connections, including tampering of meters, as well as saving electricity. Participants appreciated such inputs and committed to do their best to further mobilize the rest of the community to work closely with ESCOM on how to address local challenges regarding electricity. It was quite clear to them that only a win-win situation will improve supply of electricity with minimal interruptions. It was agreed to continue with the workshops at ward level so that more residents would benefit. Historically, the area has been riddled with tensions and strife on, amongst other things, supply of electricity. But recently the situation has turned for the better. The ANC has consistently played a strong role in monitoring the response of state-owned enterprises to economic transformation and social developments, hence the success of the workshop. The ANC government, through its state-owned companies, will follow suit and work together with the communities for a better life for all. Yabulela.
Thank you. The APC did not make use of its opportunity to make a statement. That opportunity now goes to the ANC. The ANC.
Shipika Rasho Shishimeka. Tatana wa hina loyi anga ngwazi tatana Endrum Langeni loyi anga riki mudyuhari ntsene kambe ule ka ntlawa wa malembe ya makhulu. U swi tiva hi ku hetiseka ku vava loku ku tisiwaka hi vuxika eka va khalabya na vakhegulu. Eduve, Orlando West, a White City, a Mulapo, a Mufulo, na le Muroka, mikumba yi nyikiwe vadyuhari. Vadyuhari lava a va funengele mikumba yo kufumela va yile emakaya va ri karhi va yimbelela na ku ba mikulungwane va ri karhi va hoyozela tatana Mlangeni. Ndza tshemba leswaku ndzi vulavula hi ku yimela tatana Mlangeni na vaaki lava dyuhaleke loko ndzi ku tatana Mlangeni wa khensa eka van'wamabindzu ku va tivonakarisile loko a va komberile ku nghenelela na ku hoxa xandla eka xikongomelo lexo xiximeka. Mabindzu lawa ya hlayisaka lava tsaneke na lava dyuhaleke i ntiyiso yo hoxa xandla eka ku aka hi vuntshwa na ku hluvukisa vaaki va Afrika-Dzonga. Viva Ngwazi Mlangeni, viva!
That concludes member statements. Are there any ministerial responses? Order, Honourable Member. Honourable Minister Mtetwa.
Thank you, Speaker. The question about what is happening in Manenberg, firstly, we want to say, put it on record that South African Police Service is stabilizing that area. It started in Lavender Hill last year, Hanover Park, Grassy Park. South African Police Service went in and stabilized that area. The cheap politicking was the unnecessary closing of the schools when nothing else was done except having SAPS doing its work there. And the member is really not having her facts right. In this area, you have 10 people who have died out through this period. And in the same period, in Nyanga, you have 100 people who have died. What the DA is doing is racializing the death of people in the province here. And that must be made very clearly that the violence here in this province affects not only the areas they've referred to, but also other areas, including Khayelitsha, Philippi, and others. What we've found there is that the multidisciplinary approach we've said must be done is not happening here because your local government is not delivering services. Some of the areas are very, very dark, and there are no lights in those areas, and people are not able to defend themselves against criminals in that particular area. There is rehabilitation which has to be done on the issues of drugs. Not everything about drugs in this province has to do with policing and security. The provincial government must play its role. They have a role to play and they must do just that. On the issue of the Education Trust, I want to thank the member for the kind words she said about this Education Trust of police officers who died on duty, particularly their families, and urge everybody in the society to lend a hand in this trust, because it is the responsibility of all of us to ensure that police are protected from attacks, because they are killed when they are protecting society.
Minister,
Thank you.
your time has expired.
Thank you so much.
I have on my short list Minister Lechisa Zinodi, followed by Procedural.
Thank you, Speaker. Ntate Modau, Morenaka, monokutswai ha o butse ho ya ka takatso ya tshwene. Batho ba Gauteng ba re ba emitsi ha ba tsitsinye ntate le ha ela wana le leholo ke mokgatlo o moholo wa African National Congress. Ba itse re o jetse ba tlo o phoqa. Speaker, we must congratulate all voters for turning up during the by-elections that took place throughout the country. We must never take for granted that matter, because exercising their democratic rights is what we would like to see them do every time. We also would like to congratulate those who preferred and chose to give the ANC the majority in the outcomes of those by-elections. They certainly know what's best for them in our country, given the history. We must condemn, Speaker, the death
Order, members, order.
We must condemn without hesitation the killing of a councillor and others in our country, in Ulundi. We hope that elections...
Speaker, may I address you on a point of order?
Yes, what's the point of order?
The ministers are supposed to respond specifically to statements made in the House. I would like to know which statement is that Honourable Minister referring to, responding to.
Minister, what statement are you responding to?
The statement that was given here by Mutau in the first place, and Honourable Diswai here behind, Honourable Mutau, and Honourable Diswai here, Speaker.
Proceed and conclude, Honourable Member.
And all I'm pointing out is that such...
Honourable Speaker, may I address you? The content of those statements had nothing to do with successes and congratulations on by-elections.
Order on members, order. Proceed on the member.
Yeah, no, she's actually quite confused with respect. We must insist and appeal to public out there that violence must be brought to a halt, whoever it happens to. It is worse when it happens to councillors who are public representatives who must
Point of order, sir.
be in order.
Point of
Yes.
order, please.
Yes,
I just want to help the Honourable Minister. Mr. Makosonke Msibi was not a councillor. He was not a councillor. So we don't want that to go unanswered. We don't want lies to go into our unanswered issue.
Honorable Shenge, the death of anybody is wrong. The death of councillors is wrong. Do you disagree with us, sir? Thank you very much if you don't. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you. But I have on my short list the following ministers who want to respond: Minister Pando, Minister Batabile, Minister Lulu Klingwan. In that order.
Thank you very much, Speaker, and I thank the honourable member from the IFP for referring to the person who discovered, unbeknownst to her, that she was married for 10 years. I must say I am surprised it lasted that long. We do encourage our citizens to check their status on a regular basis and have been issuing messages to the public in this regard, because we indicated that there is a great deal of identity theft in our country, and hence we call on our citizens to know their status. But I would be keen to ask the honourable member to provide me with the details of the individual so that I may assist and check on the particular office that has not been able to afford her proper assistance. Honourable members do provide me with such details from time to time, and I have found that we have been able to help and support each other in providing efficient services to the people of our country. So I make that offer to the honourable member. I should, Honourable Speaker, also really thank members of the public who have been providing these comfort packs to young girls in schools in our country, because they are a very important support to young people who often find themselves in very emotional and difficult circumstances. It is the private sector, companies, our Minister of Basic Education, as well as a range of non-governmental organizations that are playing a very important role in supporting young girls with these comfort packs. And in fact, even in countries where there is civil conflict, this has been a very important area of support for women. Finally, Speaker, I think honourable members are struggling to accept that ministers are politicians. And if they make statements that are political here, we will respond politically, because that's what we are. We are politicians while also holding executive positions. All the areas that Honourable Zinodi referred to were raised in different statements by members, and we will respond. Thank you.
Honourable Minister Batalile.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Firstly, Tlokwe, I think this House must know that the coordinator for social development in Tlokwe is the mother of a DA councillor. And to her dismay, we did not hand over food parcels the day before the elections, because she had approved that the food parcels should be distributed, and they were not distributed the day before the elections. Number two, Northwest is second when it comes to poverty. And some people just talk about poverty in their boardrooms. They don't know what poverty is. And number three,
order, members, order.
The former whip of social development, Honourable Member Pem Jwete, brought a carrier bag, a plastic bag, with a DA logo and its government that was supposed to be used for food parcels that would be delivered by SASSA.
Minister, there's a point of order.
The minister is misleading the House. That plastic bag didn't have a DA logo on, and the minister knows it.
It has the DA
Order
government.
on members, order.
It has the Western Cape government.
Yes.
Totally
Take your seat,
different to
honourable
the Democratic Alliance.
Order. Take your seat, honourable member. Take your seat. Continue.
And then, Mr. Speaker, I don't know why the DA is not talking about Kaelicha, Kukuletu, Lusigisigi, Nyandeni and Augeni, where we have been responding to the families of victims of Marikana. We are having programs there, and you are not saying anything about that. You are not saying anything about Zwele Themba and George that look like different countries. When you go to Zwele Themba, there is poverty. When you go to George, there is a different state. It's not South Africa, and you've not responded to that. When you go to Didorens, there is marasmus, there is scurvy, and we are also going there. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister Klingwan.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I stand to commend the Minister of Justice, indeed, for reopening the sexual offences courts, which we believe will definitely cut the backlogs that we have on sexual offences cases, but also the Minister of Finance for giving the necessary funding to ensure these courts will be possible. We also have Tutuzela centers, Tutuzela care centers all over the country that are also supporting victims of abuse and violence, and also the family and child support and sexual offences units that have been opened by the Minister of Police. We believe that these are strong programs that will assist us fight the scourge of violence. Sibulela ke nohulumende kunye ne companies ezithe zema ngenyawo to support the sanitary dignity campaign. We know that abantwana abangamantombazana lose up to 50 days per year of their school days. Therefore, because bengenazo izinto zokubancedisa, therefore we support the sanitary dignity campaign, which has been launched and has been supported by a number of government departments, including education, health, and social development. We want to say also more companies must come on board and assist in this regard. Diabulela kusomlong.
Minister Chabani.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I wanted to respond to one issue which was raised by Honorable Khanare with regard to the commemoration of Marikana, and let me humble myself before him and explain so that he must understand what the issues are. Firstly, that after the tragedy in Marikana, the same day the President announced the establishment of the Commission of Inquiry to understand what the truth of the matter is. The Commission of Inquiry is still in session. Two, the President established an interministerial committee which was chaired by myself to deal with the issues related to that matter as it progressed and stabilized the situation, which has been done.
Order, members, order.
Thirdly, the President established a committee to deal with the stabilization of the mining sector, which is led by the Deputy President. Fourthly, the President established an interministerial committee to deal with the rehabilitation and stabilization of the mining communities in terms of providing infrastructure, housing, water, and everything else. In the context of the program which is led by the Deputy President and building on the work which has been done during the time of the funerals, we had agreed that the process in Marikana is not a one-off issue. It's a matter which will be dealt with as a continuous basis. And therefore, there's a program which is led by religious leaders whose task is to pioneer bringing all the stakeholders to deal with the problems which arises there. Members would know that the killings in Marikana have not stopped up until today. There are a lot of people who are losing their lives, shop stewards, and everybody else. In the context of that framework, a lot of discussions have been taking place prior to the commemoration amongst all the stakeholders, the unions, the mining houses and everything else, including government. And in the context of that, we then agreed that this is the format which needs to take. The commemoration in Marikana didn't start on the 16th. It started long time
Minister,
ago.
your time has expired.
Okay.
That concludes ministerial responses. The Secretary will read the first order of the day.
Consideration of report of Joint Committee on Ethics and Members' Interests on complaints against former Minister D. Pule, MP.
Now recognize the Honorable B. Chirok.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy President, as the co-chair of the Joint Committee on Ethics and Members' Interests and the chairperson of the panel appointed to consider the allegations against the Honourable Dina Pule, I wish to present the report of the committee. The report was adopted unanimously, both by the panel and the committee as a whole, after a long and difficult process. We hope that the House will also support the findings in the same non-partisan spirit. I need to make some preliminary remarks with respect to the role of the Ethics Committee. This is a multi-party committee with members from both the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces. We have the difficult task of overseeing the proper compliance with the annual declaration by members of their financial interests and those of their close family members. In doing this, we act as the instrument of Parliament, fulfilling your requirements as an important institution of the country, maintaining public trust in its integrity. The Code of Conduct requires us to place the public interest above our personal financial interests and those close to us. We have to be objective in complying with the joint rules of Parliament. We cannot be politically partisan. We cannot allow bias or prejudice to enter into our considerations. We must base our judgments on facts, and where there's a conflict on the facts, we have to discover the truth. We must be fair and be seen to be fair. In all this, we are guided by the will of the House and the NCOP, by the national interest and by the Constitution. Parliament has a duty to reflect a common purpose and common values. And when it acts in the national interest, the whole must be greater than the sum of its parts. That is, Parliament rises above the specific concerns of parties and of individuals. Our powers as a committee are substantial. Our powers of investigation as a committee are substantial, but we're not a court of law. We must respect the rights of members and follow due process. Where we investigate the ethical conduct of a member, we do so in closed session. We are sworn to observe confidentiality, and our findings are based on the balance of probabilities. While our investigations center on the proper declaration of members' interests, these investigations often introduce evidence that goes much broader than the immediate declaration. We, as a committee, have to exercise much discretion on how far we go and what evidence is relevant. We must not deal extraneously. Finally, on the general approach of the committee, we draw a distinction between a breach of ethical conduct and a breach of some rule or law. Both are undesirable, and we have to act on both. Too often a person may act within the rules or within the law, but the conduct is unacceptable on ethical grounds and is therefore liable to sanction. I come to the Honourable Pule. In the allegations against Honourable Dina Pule, we uncovered both these transgressions, and our findings are according to these criteria. The central issue in this case was the relationship of Honourable Pule with Mr. Mgibisa and how her public office was used to benefit him improperly. She denied an affidavit that the relationship went beyond long-standing friendship. Mr. Mgibisa stated under oath that, quote, "My private life is private," and refused to answer questions about the relationship.
However, evidence emerged during the hearings that Honorable Pule and Mkhimbisa had traveled together to several foreign destinations such as Mexico, New York, Kuala Lumpur, Paris, and Prague. They shared road transport and they shared hotel accommodation. The panel obtained proof that at least one of these trips was paid for by the Department of Communications, and Mkhimbisa was listed for the purposes of that trip as Honorable Pule's spouse. The panel had great difficulty in obtaining other travel papers, and the file for the Mexico trip was lost by officials. Officials were uncooperative and gave contradictory evidence on how travel companions were recorded. What is remarkable about these trips is that Mkhimbisa had no formal status at these meetings, and when asked what his role had been, he was unable to answer. It is clear, therefore, that he benefited from several privileges through his association with Honorable Pule, none of which were declared. More seriously, the Honorable Pule seems to have been instrumental in enabling Mkhimbisa to advance from being a minor player to a dominant position in the ICT Indaba. He not only gained 6 million rand for his company, Kamano, but he steadily positioned himself to become the main player with prospects of further substantial gains. None of this was declared. Honorable Pule allowed herself to be in a position where her private interests were in direct conflict with the public interest. Honorable Pule did not act to prevent this, and indeed promoted this undesirable situation. I need to refer to some serious attempts to interfere with the work of the Ethics Committee and therefore Parliament. The witness Mkhimbisa came to give evidence accompanied by a bodyguard. This bodyguard stood outside the doors of our committee room and interfered with the registrar at a coffee break. There is no place for private bodyguards in Parliament, and he should have been removed. Throughout the hearings, it was clear that there was collusion between Honorable Pule and some senior officials in presenting a false version of their activities. The head of Parliament's Protection Services and the registrar met with a certain Mr. X who alleged that he had been approached, A, to forge certain documents which would be served on the panel to reverse its decisions, B, to arrange a hit on the registrar and myself, but he said he was afraid to do that. Well, fortunately. The consequence of this threat was that both the registrar and myself have been provided with security by Parliament, and we call for a thorough investigation of this matter. 5, in recent weeks, 3 persons, including an official of the department who had given evidence to our hearing, were subjected to bullying to try to get them to reverse their testimony. Parliament needs to take note of these attempts to intimidate the Ethics Committee and interfere with the proceedings of Parliament. In the light of all these findings, the Ethics Committee recommends the maximum penalty allowed in the joint rules of Parliament, namely, a reprimand in the House, a fine of 30 days' salary, and suspension of privileges and Honourable Pule's right to a seat in parliamentary debates or committees for a period of 15 days. She must also submit full details in respect of non-disclosure and correct the incomplete declaration for the respective years. We further recommend that the Presidency considers measures to address the relationship between the Department of Communication and other state entities and private entities. The Public Service Commission should investigate the possible misconduct of certain officials in the Department of Communication. The report should be referred to the South African Police Services and the National Prosecuting Authority for possible breaches of the Powers and Privileges Act of 2004. We also recommend that the House support the speedy revision of the Code of Conduct. We've asked for this for several occasions. We ask for it again. Speedy revision of the Code of Conduct. We also recommend that the penalties for transgression be increased. Mr. Speaker, this has been a long, drawn-out affair, requiring a great deal of research and scrutiny of the rules of the House and legislation. We must record the tenacious work of the Registrar of the Committee, Ms. Fazila Mohammed, and her support team, the excellent legal advice of Parliament's legal advisors, Advocate Zoreya Adikari and Ms. Fatima Ibrahim, and finally, and most importantly perhaps, the extraordinary commitment to finding the truth by members of the Ethics Committee. I thank you.
I thank the honourable member. I now recognize the Honourable, the Chief Whip of the Majority Party. Chief Whip.
I move that the report be adopted.
The motion is that the report be adopted. Are there any objections? No objections. Agreed to. Honourable members, in pursuance of complaints by members of Parliament and following allegations in the media, the Joint Committee on Ethics and Members' Interest proceeded to investigate a complaint against the former Minister of Communications, Ms. Dina, Pule MP. The committee's findings and recommended penalties were published in the ATC on the 7th of August 2013. Upon completing its investigation, the committee charged Ms. Pule and found her guilty in the first instance of not disclosing the financial interest of her permanent companion as required by item 9G of the Code of Conduct for Assembly and Permanent Council members. Her concealment and continued denial of the relationship allowed her permanent companion to gain improper financial benefits. Ms. Pule was also found to be in breach of item 13 of the code by not declaring to Telkom that her permanent companion had a financial interest in an event sponsored by that particular telecommunications company. As a member of the executive, she ought not to have placed herself in a position where there was a conflict of interest. In addition to the transgressions pertaining to Ms. Pule's declaration of financial interest, the committee also found her to be in breach of item 16B of the code, as she provided incorrect and misleading information. In fact, the committee found that there was intent on the part of Ms. Pule willfully to mislead the panel appointed to investigate the facts of the matter. The Joint Committee on Ethics and Members' Interest recommended 3 penalties. In its report, those penalties have now been agreed to by this House. The first penalty constitutes a reprimand in terms of item 19A of the Code of Conduct, which I will now proceed to deliver. Will the member please rise? Ms. Pule, the charges you have been found guilty of by this House are extremely serious. As public representatives, we are constantly aware that the people of South Africa look to Parliament and its members to display the highest ethical values and standards in what they say and how they conduct themselves. A great amount of trust has been placed in us as members of Parliament to chart a course that will lead to a better life for our people. That we do by protecting our national assets and by ensuring in an open and transparent manner that these assets are used only in the public interest and not for private gain. Your breach of the Code of Conduct, Ms. Pule, has gravely undermined the people's trust and brought this House and its members into disrepute. Furthermore, you willfully misled the Ethics Committee by lying under oath in your continued attempt to conceal your relationship. In doing so, you showed complete disregard for the exceptional privilege members of Parliament have of freedom of speech in this House and before its committees. Both as a member of this House and as a cabinet minister, you had undertaken to uphold the Constitution and to act according to its principles when you took your oath of office. Your direct contravention of the provisions of Section 96(2) of the Constitution by allowing your position to be used to improperly benefit your permanent companion shows indifference to our Constitution, which is unacceptable. Please be seated, Ms. Pule. Honourable members, I have now acted within my authority and issued the reprimand as required. The suspension of Ms. Pule's privileges and right to a seat in parliamentary debates or committees for 15 days will come into effect tomorrow. And I will also ensure that the fine of 30 days' salary that was agreed by this House is imposed. Ms. Pule is required to submit full details in respect of any non-disclosure of her financial interest and to correct the incomplete declarations for the year 2009 to 2013. The remainder of the recommendations agreed by the House today will be communicated to the relevant role players. That concludes the House consideration of the report and the recommendation of the Ethics Committee and the implementation of the penalties as required by Item 20 of the Code. I now recognize the Honourable Chief Whip of the Majority Party. Honourable Chief Whip.
Honourable Speaker, Honourable Pule wishes to address the House.
Honourable Pule, you have the floor.
Honourable Speaker, thank you very much for the opportunity. I want to say in this House that I gave the best I could do to do my job, and that if in the course of me doing my job I made a mistake, I am sorry, I apologize. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Pule. Apology has been accepted. The Secretary will read the second order.
Decision of question on second reading, Labour Relations Amendment Bill.
Honourable members, I wish to remind you that after the debate on the second reading of this bill on Thursday, the 20th of June, 2013, the decision of questions on the second reading was postponed. Are there any objections to the Labour Relations Amendment Bill being read a second time? Okay, there are objections. Do you? Okay. Can I hear the objections? DA? Any other objections? Freedom Front? Any other objections?
Speaker, will you please also register Cope's objection? Thank you.
Cope's objection? Okay. We have noted the objections of the DA, Cope, and the FF+. No? Okay. Objections have been noted. Honourable Member.
Speaker, the Democratic Alliance would like to call for a division on this.
Order, honourable members, order. A division having been called, the bells will be rung for 10 minutes. All members, honourable members, honourable members, order, honourable members. I would like to suggest that 5 minutes might be enough for this instead of 10 minutes. Is that agreed to? Thank you. The bells will be rung for 5 minutes.
If they're in the house, yeah.
Order. Please be seated. Please take your seats.
Doesn't matter, they just need to press vote.
Okay. Please take your seats. I would like to remind members that they may only vote from their allocated seats. When requested to do so, members must simply indicate their vote by pressing the appropriate button. And if a member inadvertently presses the wrong button, the member may thereafter press the correct button. The last button pressed will be recorded as the member's vote when the voting session is closed by the chair. Please remember that your name might not appear, but if you just press the button, it will appear in the screen, our screens here in front. Order. The question before the House is that the Labor Relations Amendment Bill be read a second time. Are members in their allocated seats? Voting will now commence. Those in favor of the bill being read a second time should press the yes button. Yes. Those against should press the no button. Those wishing to abstain should press the abstain button. Have all members voted? Thank you. The voting session is now closed. Okay. Order. The result of the division is as follows. The ayes, the yes, are 248, the noes 81, and there are no abstentions. The question is accordingly agreed to, and the Secretary will read the bill a second time.
Labor Relations Amendment Bill.
Thank you. The bill will be sent to the National Council of Provinces for concurrence. The Secretary will read the third order.
Second reading debate, Special Economic Zones Bill.
I now recognize the Honourable the Minister.
Thank you, Speaker. Special economic zones may be defined as geographically designated areas of a country set aside for specific targeted economic activities and generally supported by special arrangements and systems that are often
Order, members, order. Proceed, Minister.
Supported by special arrangements and systems that are often different from those operating in the rest of the country. Up to now in South Africa, we've had only one form of special economic zones, the Industrial Development Zones operating in terms of the Manufacturing Development Act of 2000. This program has focused on export-orientated industries, often located in and around ports or airports, benefiting in the main from duty-free entry of inputs used in the production of export products through customs-controlled areas. To date, 4 of these IDZs have been designated in Kucha, in East London, in Richards Bay, and in the OR Tambo Airport, with 3 of them being operational. While these have achieved some important successes, with 42 operational investments worth 4 billion, creating over 5,000 direct jobs and 43,000 construction jobs, some weaknesses in the implementation of the program have been identified during the IDZ policy review. These include a number of weaknesses in governance models, particularly in relation to the responsibilities of national government, provinces, municipalities, and operators of industrial development zones, the lack of focused IDZ incentives, insufficient stakeholder coordination, and lack of integrated planning. More importantly, the existing legislation provides, as I've said already, for only one type of special economic zones. Confronted with these challenges and also mindful of the potential of special economic zones to achieve industrial deconcentration, where the current bill seeks to bring into being a possibility of a broader range of special economic zones. The bill provides for a determination of special economic zones policy and strategy, for the establishment of an advisory board and a fund, for designation, promotion, development, operation and management of SEZs, regulatory measures and incentives for SEZs, and the establishment of a single point of contact or one-stop shop to deliver government services. The bill allows for a variety of special economic zones, including free ports.
Order, please. Let's hear the Minister, please.
Free ports, free trade zones, industrial development zones, and sector development or specialized economic zones. We've also been developing following support measures to support economic zones. A broader SEZ incentive strategy, which will allow for 15% corporate tax in SEZs, a building tax allowance, an employment tax incentive, customs control areas incentives with VAT exemption and duty-free entrance of inputs, and a 12I tax incentive. There will be an enhanced funding strategy, an infrastructure strategy, a skills and supply development strategy, and the one-stop shop strategy. The DTI, in addition to developing the bill, has been working on the development of the SEZ tax incentive strategy, which was already announced by the Minister of Finance. And we have also been working with the provinces and within MINMEC to identify potential SEZs, at least one in every province. These potential projects have now gone from pre-feasibility to feasibility studies, which will allow us, once the bill is passed, to begin the process of designated new special economic zones. It's therefore important that the current bill, which is the enabler, is passed expeditiously so that we can take advantage of the imminent interest and opportunity which the Special Economic Zones Programme will provide. The House's support for this bill would therefore be greatly welcomed, and I thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. I now call upon the Honourable J.L. Fabs.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. Honourable members of this House, Honourable Deputy President, comrades, colleagues, fellow South Africans. You know, we often sit here and we wonder how we should tell you about this bill. But this is so easy to speak about because it speaks about something so close to all our hearts. The Special Economic Zones Bill takes South Africa significantly further along the journey which began in 1997. when the ANC-led government adopted a policy allowing for the establishment of industrial development zones. This paradigm shift in our industrial policy, which took the country, and this is so important, it took us from an inward-looking industrial strategy to an export-led growth, one that would promote investment in less developed areas, boost job creation, and would also enhance the manufacturing sector, and at the same time facilitate integration into the global economy from which we had become pariahs, you will recall, prior to '94. The SEZs are indeed sharp policy tools that are used to promote rapid economic growth by using support measures to attract targeted foreign investment and domestic technology, and also to facilitate what is so important, coordinated planning and the implementation by the various government departments. You know, what has been acknowledged globally by the OECD countries, by China, are that SEZs are cities in their own rights, and these zones usually cover all industrial and service sectors. The Minister has already explained to us the different zones that will be provided, so I won't go down that area. The Honourable Waili will highlight this industrial stimulation in the rural areas, which expands the economic development footprint beyond the ports and beyond urban areas through incentivized investments and one-stop shops. In fact, it is the one-shop idea that we know will cut red tape itself. With this establishment, you will smooth out and fast-track processes by investors to eliminate bottlenecks in our system. In this regard, and this is so important, you will have the coordination between the DTI, the economic area, as well as Home Affairs. And it is Home Affairs, Economic Development, and the DTI working together like this in synergy that will fast-track this process. Of course, you hear us talking about Triple P, and I know there was some talk in the committee about can't we have private ones only. Internationally, it is now proven you must have the public sector. You must have government involvement if you want to succeed with SEZs. There is a fund now established, which the Minister did refer to, the incentives that are established, which kick in January 2014. Now, where in the world are you going to get to this extent in an emerging country, a corporate tax cut from 28 to 15%? And that is going to happen, and that will bring in investment. And I must say, all members of the committee were supportive of this. Opposition members supporting also the ANC in this regard. But what concerned us was the issue of leakage. You know, things falling off trucks, as it were, and never getting to Lesotho and winding up here. But we have been fortunate in this particular model where you will have Home Affairs, where you will have SARS, and the customs control area will operate so that you will prevent the leakage. And indeed, what there is for companies to qualify, they would have to be effectively managed in South Africa to qualify for these incentives and generate at least 90% of their income from services or sale of goods from activities attributable to a fixed place of business in the zone. And just to re-emphasize, the company would have to be established in the zone itself and within South Africa, of course. There are issues around the industrial development zone because the bill calls for IDZs within a 3-year period to become part of the SEZs. But there is this 3-year period and transitional arrangements in this particular regard. The other area I would just like to refer to is the emphasis on the triple P. Infrastructure development for industrialization, as you know, is at the forefront of the government's new growth path. The ownership of SEZs depends on each country's needs and the industrial development strategy. There is no question of one approach, but rather an analysis of a specific country and customizing the SEZ to suit the particular country. Given South Africa's industrial development path, the SEZ bill allows for SEZs to be owned by various spheres of government. Public-private partnerships. These public-private partnerships we welcome as an opportunity to accelerate the growth in our economy. The public-private partnership has a great success stories in many, many countries, and it will have a successful path in South Africa as well. With the establishment, as we said, of the one-stop shops, this will facilitate the easy registration, the licensing, and other arrangements that businesses have indicated took so long during the IDZ and investors perhaps got tired of waiting for. Another issue that came up during the committee was the issue of flexible labor. We need flexible labor legislation. Now, just a minute, the World Bank does not agree that that is such a good idea at all. In fact, it specifically states that, and this is after a serious study, not done by ourselves, we're now looking at that, by the World Bank, which included Africa, it came out with an unqualified statement saying there is no correlation between cheap labor and a successful SEZ. And it is saying to the private sector, come along now, let's work together. Let's work together to grow the economy and not work against each other in this regard. The ANC supports this piece of legislation wholeheartedly. I thank you. Malibongwe.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I now recognize the Honourable W.G. James.
House Chair, it's my great pleasure to speak in favour of this bill, and this is why. No nation is perfect, and we certainly are no exception. As long as our founding President Nelson Mandela's dream of elevating what someone once called the better angels of our nature proves to be elusive, we will remain an imperfect nation. We must always invoke the principles of the first democratic administration to rebuke the inequalities, the poverty, the joblessness, and the hypocrisy of pervasive corruption that plague the administration of President Zuma, whose values simply bear no resemblance to that of Mr. Mandela. One of the few bright sparks in the darkness that defines this administration is the DDI's replacement of the lackluster industrial development zones with the more promising special economic zones. We support, the DA supports the SEZs because they can become engines of innovation that solve problems of jobless, slow economic growth and become places of experimentation where trade unions partner to put sustainability above profit. Disputes are efficiently and effectively resolved in ways that are just and are fair. Bureaucratic red tape is minimized. Necessary infrastructure gets to be laid down by government on time and to scale. Corruption is punished to the full extent of the law, and practical solutions to practical problems of doing business are found. The SEZs could be places where the positive qualities, the better angels of our nature, rise to the challenge. We have come this far, House Chair and colleagues, as a nation, because as a people, South Africans are resourceful, we have a can-do attitude, we possess an entrepreneurial spirit, we embrace a risk-taking ethos, we are problem solvers, we once were and certainly must be again future-oriented nation builders. How this contrasts with President Zuma, who constantly looks in his rear-view mirror, fearful of what's coming, trapping us in the past, keeping us prisoners of apartheid, and bringing out the worst qualities of greed and self-serving opportunism, and stripping government bare of its resources at every turn. We now have an opportunity with the SEZs, but Minister Davies has to solve some problems for them to succeed. Firstly, it appears as though the SEZs would take much too long, some say close to 2 years, to get off the ground. Then there are some constitutional issues that require clarity. Firstly, is it constitutional for SEZs to have different protection and benefit regimes? Secondly, is it constitutional for Minister Davies to exercise power and perform functions beyond that conferred upon him by law? The SEZ bill does not specify what laws and which regulations Minister Davies may suspend or derogate, or which type of incentive he may or may not implement. This leaves considerable uncertainty and a measure of personal license, which even he may find to be unwarranted, and a step of unrestrained personal power taken too far. Finally, Chapter 6 leaves openings for corruption and the possibility that operator licenses will be given to politically connected entities. Parliament needs to satisfy itself that these and other issues are addressed to ensure that the SEZs reach their full potential. The DA supports the SEZ bill. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I now recognize the Honourable GBD McIntosh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the most interesting bits of news have come from the chairman of our portfolio committee, Honourable Fubbs, that the corporate tax rate in SEZs will be 15%, and that is to be commended because it's the private sector that will drive these SEZs, and they must be encouraged. I think the department should be congratulated, and also the committee staff, for good presentations during this process. The Constitutional Legal Services officers were extremely helpful, and our chair lady works very hard, and we had good presentations by stakeholders. This bill is about building and growing South Africa's economy by creating special economic zones. Strangely enough, the world has many special economic zones, but many have been failures. We in this country have had a history of special economic zones, and many of them were failures. But this bill, in terms of the National Democratic Plan, and you will notice that the chair lady was very careful to talk about the new growth path, not the National Development Plan. We need to grow our export promotions. We need to grow our domestic and regional demands. We need to strengthen our industrial base, and we need to promote labor-absorbing industrialization activities. We have 5 existing IDZs. Kucha has been very unsuccessful. Nothing's happened at OR Tambo. Only Richards Bay and East London have been moderately successful, and Saldanha, which is brand new, looks as though it could be very successful for the oil and gas industries. These proposals have gone through the NEDLAC process and various concerns were raised. But once again, we find that this bill is not as good as it could be. It's got a shotgun approach. Section 22 will allow almost anybody to apply for a license for an SEZ, but deliberately excludes private enterprise from applying. It's all government centralized control. Once again, the left dictates to South Africa on how we should run our economy. Despite the international trend towards private enterprise driving SEZs, the minister turns his face against it. We cannot expect every municipality to apply for an SEZ. At the same time, coastal towns and places with airports could apply for SEZs. Uppington, for example, has a good international airport. They could do a tremendous amount to develop technology and industry for the solar power industry. And similarly, the same for Limpopo, for Polokwane's airport. Another one is on the question of job creation. Now, as I'm talking to you, there are 30,000 auto workers out on strike. Most of them are around the Kucha development zone. Now, I don't know whether Vavi is behind it or Dlamini, but maybe the Honorable Waile will tell us that when he makes his speech. But the point that the chair lady of our committee doesn't understand is nobody wants cheap labor. We want easy labor. You must be able to hire and fire and do it easily. And if one fires, you fire fairly, but easily. And that will make a big difference to the SEZs. The minister, again, typically, with his ideological background, wants all kinds of controls on these SEZs. I think we should be aware that in Ethiopia, in Nigeria, and in Kenya, and even now in Angola, where you can get a business registered and started within 24 hours. And remember, Angola was Marxist-Leninist, heavy Marxist-Leninist. They've completely changed their attitude to investment. And people won't come to South Africa if they can go to countries where they are free to move their labor, employ labor and invest more effectively. We hope, COPE hopes the SEZs will prove more effective. Okay, sengiyabonga Phathislalo. COPE will support the bill.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I now call upon the Honourable M. Tlengwa.
Thank you very much, House Chairperson. This bill has substantially improved since the IFP's Honourable Dr. Ambrosini reacted to the presentation of its first draft to the committee by calling it, and I quote, an ideological monstrosity. At the time, the bill revealed the premise that doing business in South Africa is too difficult and that special zones had to be established with different rules to make it easier. Some of the issues of constitutionality raised by the IFP through Dr. Ambrosini in the committee have been addressed, which assures us that the department can listen when it wants to. The bill, however, does empower the minister to give incentives and special measures to those located in the SEZs. The SEZs, and gives no indication what these may be over and above subsidies. We are giving plainly the minister a blank check without any measure of parliamentary input or approval, and this is a major concern. Government's involvement in the establishment of SEZs is important, but we do want to stress that the role of government should be primarily to create a conducive environment for businesses to operate. And we hope that these SEZs will do just that, to enable us to address the high levels of unemployment which have been revealed to now stand at a staggering 25.7%. Our cost of doing business has increased, and we can no longer afford to industrialize through solely large welfare programs for industrialists, underpinned not by economic reasons, but by the quest to empower and enrich the few. This bill, if passed and not overseen properly, could become a conduit for huge waste of taxpayers' money with little benefit to our real economy, which is capable of prospering and thriving without the benefits of government steroids. Since 1992, the IFP has been proposing that Durban should be established as a free port, and Southern Africa does need its own Singapore, Hong Kong, or Macau. One would need to pursue this type of vision and provide Southern Africa with independent centers of growth and development. So as the IFP supports this bill, we do want to stress that the most important thing would be to look at the issue of job creation and to ensure that we are able to create self-help and self-reliant businesses which are sustainable and are able to improve the lives and collective sustainable livelihoods of the masses of our people who are plagued and struggling every day to deal and face with poverty. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I now recognize the Honourable A.D. Alberts.
Thank you, Chair. The economic zones contemplated by the SEZ Bill presents a vast improvement on the existing IDZ that only allows for limited benefits to create an enabling environment for business to grow. The IDZs have not been particularly successful in providing for incubation and growth space for business and industrial activity. Die feit dat daar nou moontlik belastingvoordele geskep word vir besighede wat hulle in 'n spesiale ekonomiese sone vestig, is natuurlik van groot belang en sal die moontlikheid van suksesvolle beleggings in sodanige zones versterk. Dit is juist een van die groot nadele van die wet wat 'n groot rol gespeel het in die gebrek aan bewese sukses in zones soos Kuga. It is therefore positive to see government taking important lessons from the lack of success from the current IDZs. Business looks for an enabling environment and will not participate in any schemes unless it appears to be beneficial from a profit point of view. The Minister will, however, also have to look further than tax incentives to lure business. BBBE is a driver of cost, as evidenced by an increasing number of researchers, and it would make sense to address this as well. We suggest that the Minister introduce a further benefit that would have the result of creating jobs, eradicating poverty in certain targeted areas. Instead of focusing on ownership in an SEZ zone, the focus should be on job creation as set out in the Bill's objectives. This can be achieved as follows. Free all businesses in certain SEZs from BBBE and instead require them to strive for certain job targets, with employment not taking place based on the national demography, but on socio-economic measures. The employees can then participate in a share scheme that will allow for broad empowerment by the way of ownership. Op hierdie wyse word daar gefokus op die belangrikste aspek om armoede uit te wis, naamlik werkskepping. SCB werk te beperk en verryk net 'n paar individue. Nadat daar op 'n breë basis werk geskep is, kan aandag gegee word aan die bemagtiging van die werkerskorps. Indien die SEZ op die wyse besigheid sou lok, kan dit daartoe lei dat zones in erg verarmde gebiede in Suid-Afrika tot stand kom, soos 'n beoogde Noord-Kaap ontwikkelingskorridor, 'n Transkei-korridor, 'n Mpumalanga-korridor en talle ander. In die Noord-Kaap sal dit beteken dat breinmense oorwegend in diens geneem en bemagtig sal word, as ook die Khoisan volke. Thus, we wish to impress upon the Minister to take an open-minded approach when approving SEZs. SEZs can be a true instrument of development. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I now call upon the Honourable Z.G. Waile.
Honourable Chairperson, Honourable Members of Parliament, the Ministers, the African National Congress welcomes and supports the SEZ Bill, especially in this important month in which we celebrate the achievements that have been made by women of this country. Challenges remain, and some of these elements of this bill seek to ensure that we redress some of those imbalances. Furthermore, we must take note that on the 17th of August, we marked 31 years since the brutal killing of the late Ruth First, hence the strategic importance of the bill in terms of addressing the plight of women. The SEZ will be able to overcome many of the limitations of the industrial development zone, which had greater industrial challenges. One of the serious challenges is to ensure that we attract investment through the foreign direct investment, but SEZ can now expand on the scope and impacts of the ITZ. The SEZ will accelerate economic growth, promote investment into less development areas, promote investment to enhance the manufacturing sector, to promote job creation. Honorable Chairperson, I want to focus on rural development. I think we all know that for a number of historical reasons, the rural areas have been marginalized and the investment has focused in the areas which were normally referred PWV areas. This bill seeks to ensure that we redress some of those particular imbalances created by the apartheid government. However, let me point out that the success of the SEZ also depends on the level of coordination between various government departments. The SEZ bill allows for ownership of SEZ by provincial governments and local municipalities. On the rural development, one of the limiting factors of the ITZs was that they could not be established near to the ports and the airports. This automatically excluded all the rural areas. The newly introduced SEZ will tackle the issues of development in rural areas. SEZ can be established anywhere in the country. The Department of Trade and Industry proposed 15 locations designated for SEZ in 8 of the 9 provinces in our country. These proposed locations are in the less developed areas in the country, including Messina, Tubatse, and Komati Port in Limpopo, Harrismith in Free State, and Wild Coast in Eastern Cape, just to mention a few. These 6 of the 15 proposed SEZ are agro-processing, the sector which is the main contributing to the employment in rural areas. The main contributing sector in the rural areas on semi-skills and unskilled labor. The proposed SEZ in the agro-processing sector are in line with our proposal for a particular municipality in Eastern Cape for the designation of SEZ in the agro-processing sector. This is an attempt to ensure that we also embark on the paradigm shift, because normally we've been focusing in what is referred to as a nodal approach of development, which has led a number of people in rural areas to migrate from rural areas to the city, something that this country cannot afford. The establishment of the SEZ in rural areas, in line with the support of our country's employment initiative, especially on women, youth, and people with disabilities. But also central to that is an issue of the black economic empowerment, which is a non-negotiable issue, because we cannot establish SEZ zone exclusively for a particular group of people which benefited in the past at the exclusion of the majority. The participation in the economic activity of the people in rural areas, women, the youth, and the people with disability is the ANC's government agenda. The designation of SEZ in rural areas brings the reality to this particular agenda. Creation of decent work and other socio-economic benefits in the region, the SEZ is located in promoting skills and technological transfers. Despite the move towards promoting greater employment, government recognizes that human resources at this country is the most asset. Therefore, it should be noted that government will not compromise reduction of labor standards, which is coded as labor market flexibility, because number of people have confirmed that our labor standards are consistent with some of the ILO. So there's no basis that workers must be subjected into slavery condition during this particular dispensation. Encouraging coordination between government and the private sector. Another challenge for the ITZ was the lack of coordination between various levels of government. The SEZ bill addresses this by better coordination, clearly defined collaboration between government and the private sector. The involvement of government in such designated areas is paramount.
Honourable Member, your time has expired.
Thanks very much. The ANC once more again supports the bill.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Thring, who will be delivering his maiden speech.
Honourable Chair, in noting our economic indicators of GDP growth in the first quarter of 2013 of 0.9%, an unemployment rate of some 25.6 to some 40%, our current account deficit standing at 5.8% of our GDP, and a Gini coefficient of 0.62 being one of the highest, if not the highest in the world, the ACDP gives that something must be done to kickstart our economy. With the South African and global economies battling to grow and create jobs, the ACDP is confident that the introduction of special economic zones could potentially be the catalyst needed to revive our economy. Mr. Chair, our economy has grown this year at a rate of 2% compared to 2.5% in 2012. And if we wish to create another 5 million jobs by 2020, then it is imperative that we look at best practice initiatives and introduce interventions that will help boost economic activity. However, South Africans need to be introduced that SEZs will not suffer the same fate as those of our industrial development zones. The establishment of the IDZs was intended to attract investment, increase exports, and the competitiveness of South African products in the 5 zones in Port Elizabeth, East London, Richards Bay, Gauteng, and Saldanha. To date, the lackluster investment in the country's industrial development zones and their failure to meet their ambitious goals have attracted mixed reviews regarding the international competitiveness of South African IDZs. The ACDP supports the promotion of competitiveness of South Africa's enterprises through leveraging investment in export-orientated manufacturing industries and promoting the export of value-added manufactured goods. SEZs, Mr. Chair, in foreign countries have a proven track record of positively contributing to addressing challenges such as unemployment, inequality, and various economic disadvantages which are rife in South Africa. The African Christian Democratic Party is of the opinion that the same could be here in our country. We hope that when introduced, these zones will in particular benefit our underdeveloped rural areas by creating a platform which will see foreign skills being transferred to our local laborers. The ACDP will support this bill. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Hill Lewis.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. The Special Economic Zones Bill has the potential to unlock real job-creating growth in our economy. SEZs can work to create jobs by attracting new investment in South Africa, but in order to do so, our SEZs need to be globally competitive. I argue, Chairperson, that global competitiveness in the SEZ space requires three things. Number one, an attractive suite of incentives. Number two, simplicity of process. And number three, seamless integration with infrastructure. This bill does not deal directly with incentives, save for providing the enabling environment for the government to design and offer a comprehensive set of incentives to potential investors. The entire SEZ project rises and falls on the attractiveness of the incentives that government comes up with, and so we will watch those developments keenly. However, the incentives announced by the Finance Minister earlier this year provide an excellent start, but it remains to be seen whether the Minister can get agreement on the actual implementation of that package. But incentives alone, Chairperson, will not be enough, because there will always be some other place or some other government that will try to top whatever we can realistically and sustainably offer. That brings me to the second critical ingredient, infrastructure. The major test of this department, and indeed this legislation, will be whether the department can work with other departments and spheres of government to deliver special economic zones which offer easy access to efficient, world-class transport networks, energy networks, and government services. Lastly, Chair, there must be process simplicity. A potential investor scanning the globe for the next place to locate his or her factory will not be willing to wait around while national government, local governments, and provincial governments lumber into action. Investors will simply move elsewhere. The process outlined in this bill is cumbersome and relies on several ministerial decisions by both the DTI Minister and the Finance Minister. In the Portfolio Committee, the DA pushed consistently for a much simplified process for the application and designation of a special economic zone and for the appointment of an operator. The department assured us that the process from beginning to end would not take longer than 6 months. That's on the record, and we will hold them to it. Finally, the DA was successful in strengthening the role of local and provincial governments in designing and offering their own incentive packages, which we believe will be critical to the success of the SEZ project. Local governments in particular, Chairperson, have an enormous scope to offer cost-saving incentives to investors in rates and service charges, and particularly in electricity charges. We hope that local governments around the country will make good use of this opportunity. Speaker, SEZs can grow our economy and create jobs, but in order to do so, the government will need to ensure that they are internationally competitive, that they are quickly and efficiently connected to reliable infrastructure networks and services, and that the process to be followed is simple to understand and can be easily and quickly implemented. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Van der Merwe.
House Chairperson, honourable members, the Minister described the special economic zones with a definition, but in its simplest definition, a special economic zone is a geographical region that is designed to export goods and provide employment. It is in this simplest form a special area with special incentives designed as a special mechanism to help the country to achieve its development goals. And part of what the committee have done in amending this bill is to make sure that it is accessible and provides a seamless structure to achieve its objectives. There are many international examples of success stories in SEZs, and our international partners such as China, also referred to by our chairperson, have established a number of SEZs with dramatic success in furthering economic development and creating jobs and promoting exports. The Chinese SEZ program began in 1980 when about 5 areas were designated in various provinces. Since then, many more have been established. These areas have great growth, and the development dividend has been quite spectacular. In India, the global crisis and the collapse of trade during 2008 and 2009 dramatically hurt exports in that country, as in other emerging markets. But the SEZs were the one source of solace for the economy, registering impressive growth in exports during that period. If we consider the potential impact of this piece of legislation on our economy and indeed on the communities and people that will be affected, it is a much anticipated bill. But the bill is also, in a sense, a technical bill because it provides for all the designation of the zones, for their promotion and development, and also provides for boards and the regulation issues around licenses and permits. It is necessary that this House considers and passes legislation that is both progressive in terms of our national objectives, but that is also practicable and implementable. Therefore, it was very encouraging that although all the submissions that the committee received support the concept of the SEZs, we received a number of important and thoughtful submissions from the public on improving it. One of the most frequently repeated issues was that the streamlining of structures and lines of accountability of the bill be emphasized. The bill has therefore been amended by the committee to account for some of these concerns. In the bill that we received, there was a good deal of confusion about the respective roles of the licensee and that of the operator. In the amended bill, the committee has made numerous small changes, but some substantial ones as well, acknowledging some of these problems and dealing with them. Simply put, the process starts with the application from a government entity or a public-private partnership, which is important, to the Minister for designation of an area to become an SEZ. The successful applicants then become licensees and establish an SEZ entity with a board, and this board in turn appoints an operator, which must develop, manage and operate the zone. Businesses wishing to locate in the area must apply to the operator, who must make recommendations to the board. The committee spent considerable time on refining this process, and we believe it is now a workable structure which will also fulfill the policy objectives of driving industrial and economic growth. Special attention in the bill is given to making as simple as possible for businesses to apply to the operator of the zones to access the benefits. One such imperative is a requirement that the operator in the zone must, and I quote, facilitate a single point of contact or a one-stop shop that delivers the required government services and provides simplified procedures for setting up and conducting businesses in that SEZ. That's clause 35. We hope that this might create a positive precedent for general application in our society for accessing government services. The preamble of the bill recognises that measures must be implemented to enhance domestic and regional demand, to attract foreign investment to our country, while at the same time strengthening the South African industrial base and promoting a labour-absorbing industrialisation path. It envisages that the SEZs will be a mechanism that will contribute to the realisation of our economic growth and development goals. The ANC supports this bill. We believe it is a forward-looking piece of legislation intended to focus on new sources of competitiveness that lie in innovation and productivity in the zones, supported by streamlined services and incentives. We trust that it will be supported in this House and quickly become law. I just do need to say, Chairperson, the opposition parties present some rather baffling arguments here. In committee, they agree with almost everything, meekly, like pussycats, but put them here on this platform and they come out all hellfire and brimstone. This is a good bill, ladies and gentlemen, honourable members. Politicking will not change that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I now recognise the Honourable Minister of Trade and Industry.
Chairperson, I can hold my breath for nearly as long as I've got to respond, so I can't really go in detail. But I do want to just say that thanks to everybody for the support for the bill. I want to say that on this occasion, I actually agree with what the Honourable Hill Lewis had to say. Promoting SEZs is not just about engaging in a race to the bottom in the provision of incentives. It's also about other things. It's about the development of the infrastructure. It's about developing a vision. It's about designing the relationship of the SEZ with productive activities. It's about the entrepreneurship of the operators. And I think that this is the experience of these London IDZ, but also the international experience. It's how the thing is run and managed and what is presented to potential investors. So I think that what we're providing for here is for a process that allows us to move in that direction. The idea that there could be corruption in the awarding of licenses, I think, is actually not really a real issue. In fact, the minister operates through a board, and the board is then bound in terms of the Section 31 to follow fair, equitable, transparent, competitive, cost-effective procurement processes. I think there are plenty of checks and balances in that regard. The points that were made about Section 22, I think, were misunderstood. This is actually a clause which allows the Minister of Trade and Industry to work with other ministers to fast-track a whole range of permits, environmental permits, and work permits and things of that sort. It's part of joined-up government and speeded-up processes. The bill provides for a lot of inclusion of the private sector in these as owners and licensees through partnerships in the PPP, as operators, developers of the SEZ itself, and as businesses and investors in the SEZ and beneficiaries of all what is that's offered in the SEZs. As I said before, what we are doing in order to fast-track this is we've already started a process together with the provinces and the municipalities to identify potential SEZs. We've been doing this work. The work has now proceeded from pre-feasibility to feasibility studies. Those proposals will be put to the board, which will apply its mind, and hopefully we can begin to designate a number of SEZs in different parts of the country in the very near future. I thank the honourable members for their support, and we look forward to a productive engagement in rolling out these SEZs in the near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Are there any objections to the bill being read a second time? No objections. Agreed to. The Secretary will read the bill a second time.
Special Economic Zone Bills.
The bill will be sent to the National Council of Provinces for concurrence. The Secretary will read the fourth order.
Consideration of Protection of Personal Information Bill.
I now recognize the Honourable Landers, who will introduce the report.
Honourable Chairperson, the Protection of Personal Information Bill has a long history, having been tabled in Parliament in 2009. Lest we have forgotten and need reminding, the Protection of Personal Information Bill gives expression to the right to privacy provided for in Section 14 of our Constitution. That right includes the right to protection against unlawful collection, retention, dissemination, and use of our personal information. On 11 September 2012, the second reading of debate of the bill was held in the National Assembly, which subsequently approved the bill. On 12 June 2013, the Select Committee on Security and Constitutional Development of the National Council of Provinces, having considered the bill, agreed to this bill with all the amendments it had agreed to set out in a report. These amendments, mostly of a technical nature, were referred to the Justice Portfolio Committee. The Justice Portfolio Committee has carefully considered these amendments and unanimously approved them. The Justice Portfolio Committee now asks this House to approve the Protection of Personal Information Bill as amended by the National Council of Provinces. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. As there is no list of speakers, I now recognize the Honourable Chief Whip of the Majority Party.
Thank you, Honourable House Chair. I move that the bill be passed as amended with textual amendments. Thank you.
The motion is that the bill as amended be passed with a textual correction. Are there any objections? No objections, agreed to. The bill will be sent to the President for assent. The Secretary will read the fifth order.
Second reading debate, Banks Amendment Bill.
I now recognize the Honourable Van Rooyen, a member of the committee who will address the House on the bill.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. Honourable members, guided and driven by a resolve that called for the building of technical capacities of government with a view to a democratic developmental state, a resolution that speaks to the building and strengthening of finance institutions which are accessible to the people and which are able to effectively channel financial and institutional resources towards a variety of economic transformation objectives. At the center of the attainment of this resolution is the need to build a sound banking and realization of financial stability. Honourable Chairperson, the Banks Amendment Bill contains inter alia provisions amending the Banks Act of 1990 so as to bring certain provisions in line with their practical application, to update references to legislation and institutions, to provide that the contravention of Financial Intelligence Center Act of 2001 is a cause for suspension or cancellation of registration as a bank, to align the Banks Act of 1990 with the Companies Act, and to comply further with the requirements of the Basel Committee of Banking Supervision, and to provide for matters connected therewith. Among other things, the bill empowers the register, which in our case is the Reserve Bank, to cancel a bank's registration after consultation with the minister and notifying the institutions concerned. The apparent benefits of this amendment will be to increase the speed with which the regulator can withdraw a banking license. Honourable Chairperson, one lesson coming out of the global financial crisis was the speed at which bank regulators had been able to act and avoid a run on a bank, but also the speed which anxiety of depositors is managed is of essence. To provide for this, the bill empowers the Governor of the South African Reserve Bank to appoint a curator if he or she deems it desirable in the public interest, by notifying in writing the Chief Executive Officer or directors of the said bank. The primary idea is to target the speed in which the regulator is able to intervene in cases where the business of banking institutions places a systemic risk on the South African banking system. In addition, the bill gives clarity on companies acquiring an interest in a company outside our republic. Finally, Honourable Chairperson and the House, the bill touches on and gives clarity on the topical issue of remuneration in the banking sector. And also in compliance with the King III, it emphasizes on the need to establish independent remuneration committees comprised of independent non-executive directors. Honourable Chair, amendments are a step in the right direction and deserves everyone's support. Ke a leboga. We thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. There's been a request for a declaration. Democratic Alliance.
Thank you, House Chairperson. The DA agrees with the broad thrust of this bill to amend the Banks Act. And because it defines the responsibility of a bank's remuneration committee in Clause 34, it presents a real opportunity to reform the law to make sure that executive pay is linked to their performance. The DA has a progressive and bold policy in this area. We believe that we need to overhaul our laws, including the Companies Act, to ensure that transparency is increased so that shareholders can see more easily what executives are being paid. We also believe that the power of the shareholders to hold those executives to account must be boosted too. Amongst other reforms, we propose that all audited companies should publish a figure for total reward for each director in their financial statements. that these companies should include an explanation of how executive pay relates to the company's performance, and that shareholders should get a real say over executive pay. So this bill presents the first real opportunity for the DA to get some of these proposals into legislation. In committee, we moved an amendment to that clause the Whip was speaking about, clause 34, to require that a bank's remuneration committee must consult shareholders on their executives' pay. We are very pleased that the committee saw fit to support the DA. So we support this bill, and especially this amendment, that is an important first step in our campaign to ensure that executive pay is aligned with performance. With this campaign, the DA will work to tackle those high-powered corporate insiders who abuse remuneration committees that are not independent and who abuse shareholders who are not sufficiently informed. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Are there any further declarations? Go.
Thank you, House Chairperson. I just rise on behalf of the Congress of the People to support this bill, to support the caretaker chairperson of the committee, Mr. Van Rooyen, and also to echo the remarks that was made by the Honourable Harris in terms of the remuneration of CEOs who are in some instances outrageous.
Are there any further declarations? The IFP.
Thank you, Chairperson. I rise on behalf of the IFP also to support this amendment bill, and wish to say that we trust that this kind of regulation of remuneration would extend to those that head up our SOEs, because we've heard in the past, and I think I've raised this with Honourable Minister Kikaba, that some of the CEOs of our SOEs are paid exorbitant salaries, and we get strikes, and ordinary people on the ground strike because their salary is not even $1 million of what the CEOs earn, let alone the shares that they get, the preferential shares and the pensions that they get when they retire. I think it's good that the banks are looking at this, and there is this remuneration committee, and we would support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Are there any further declarations? The ANC.
Thank you, House Chair. The ANC has a clear view on this matter, and safe to say we agree with the broad understanding that the opposition has. But we want to further clarify the fact that the premise underlying this amendment is that the existing remuneration structures create perverse incentives for bank employees to engage in risky behavior, which may pose substantial risk to the soundness of the South African banking system. House Chair, the success of banking institutions, like most business enterprises, relies on their capability to attract the best available talent. Generally, the primary bargaining tools employed by banks are financial incentives. This leads banks to offer progressively aggressive remuneration packages for the executives due to the performance nature of the industry. Remuneration packages tend to rely on lofty targets which can encourage reckless behavior. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Are there any objections to the bill being read a second time? No objections. Agreed to. The Secretary will read the bill a second time.
Banks Amendment Bill.
The bill will be sent to the National Council of Provinces for concurrence. The Secretary will read the sixth order.
First reading debate, rates and monetary amounts amendment and amendment of revenue laws bill.
I now recognize the Honourable Van Rooyen.
Thank you once more, Honourable Chairperson. Honourable Members, this bill forms part of the annual tax proposals announced by the Minister of Finance in the budget speech that was done earlier this year. And of course, these announcements are given effect by tax bills tabled during the course of the year. Inter alia, the bill provides tax relief for individual income taxpayers by adjustments to the personal income tax brackets, partially accommodating for fiscal drag. The total relief provided for amounts to 7 billion. Although the personal income tax brackets were not fully adjusted for inflation in 2013-2014, it should be noted that over the last decade and a half, personal income tax brackets were adjusted above the annual rates of inflation, thereby over the medium term, and provided both for fiscal drag and real income relief. The monetary amounts on the monthly medical tax credits are increased in line with inflation, thereby maintaining the real value of medical tax relief for individuals. The monthly tax credits will be increased from 230 to 242 for each of the first two beneficiaries, and from 154 to 162 for each additional beneficiary, with effect from the 1st of March 2013. These medical tax credits provide for a more equitable tax relief dispensation and makes medical schemes membership more affordable for middle-income earners. The bill provides income tax relief for small businesses. The monetary brackets of the graduated income tax table for small business corporation were increased, and additional lower 21% income bracket is introduced. In addition, the monetary annual turnover amount for a qualifying small business corporation is increased from 14 million to 20 million per annum. The bill also provides for increases in the monetary amounts of various specific indirect taxes. Tobacco excess duties are increased between 55.8% and 10%, and excess duties on alcoholic beverages are increased between 5.7% and 10%. Honorable Chair and members, amid the prevailing economic conditions and the daily struggles for survival by our people, it is our take as a committee that this bill was well thought through and must be supported by all. Riale Bucha, we thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Are there any declarations?
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. Indeed, as the previous speaker has indicated, Mr. Van Rooyen, our Deputy Chairperson, it is fact that the Rates and Monetary Amounts and Amendment of Revenue Bill is an annual bill that gives effect to the tax proposals in the budget. The good news is, Minister, that we acknowledge that there was generous concessions this year. While National Treasury was indeed generous this year in tax bracket and rates adjustments, especially for small business taxation in general, there were three main types of taxes where brackets were not adjusted fully for inflation. It is in this thresholds and brackets that for several important taxes were not adjusted for inflation, meaning that there was bracket creep, or in real terms, increases in taxes, or if I might put it differently, decreases in the tax breaks for various groups. And if I can give you an example, sir, like for instance, personal income tax, inflation for 2012 was just below 6%. But in thresholds, it was only adjusted for 3.5%, meaning real tax increases of 2.5%. Secondly, the turnover tax for micro businesses has not been adjusted since 2009. And thirdly, taxable income for nominal retirement withdrawals not adjusted for 2013. Now, with regards to tax relief for individual taxpayers, the bill provides tax relief for individual income taxpayers by adjustments to the personal income tax brackets, partially accommodating for the fiscal drags, and that is the position where individuals move into a higher income tax bracket due to inflationary adjustments to their wages and salaries. The second category, sir, is with regards to retirement lump sum benefits, and Chair, this is a different story completely. The tax tables, although slightly adjusted on an ad hoc basis, have not been adjusted for inflation in 2013. We propose, Chair, that the schedule should be adjusted annually in the same manner as the normal taxes are adjusted. The upper thresholds has also not been adjusted, only a single 5% increase since 2009. Now, National Treasury stated no policy reason, especially in the lower threshold groups, why retirees should not be subjected to increasingly harsher tax measures than the general tax-paying population. We have not heard sound reasoning why normal tax rates should be adjusted for inflation, but not the retirement lump sum withdrawal rates. I think this morning we also spoke to Professor Osmond of PricewaterhouseCoopers, and he indicated the importance of savings for the public of South Africa, and that they have the maximum return on their investment. Turnover tax adjusted for micro businesses has not been adjusted since 2009, thereby excluding a greater number of micro businesses every year. The threshold here, sir, is also problematic. It is also inadequate since businesses would have to generate over 108,000 in profit from 100 million turnover per year. And this is, of course, a tax on turnover. The thresholds needs to be adjusted annually for inflation. The DA supports the view that the Tax Review Commission
Honourable Member, your time is
will
expired.
have a look at this bill, but unfortunately we cannot support this bill. Thank you.
Are there any further declarations?
Chairperson, thank you very much. We just rise to say that we shall support this bill. It's not easy to sit on this side and support when you rise taxes, but there's also enough tax breaks in this. So let us just remind us all that we need to spend the money hard-earned by South African and paid over by taxes in a correct and a wonderful manner. Thank you.
Are there any further declarations? The IFP.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. As we've heard from the other honourable members, this is a consequential bill, and it's human nature, Honourable Minister, to welcome tax relief and to oppose increases. However, one has to strike a balance, and as we say, what one wins on the swings, you lose on the roundabout. But tax collection in South Africa, from all the reports that we've received, is excellent. More and more people are registering as taxpayers, and this is indeed a very, very good sign that the citizens of South Africa are recognizing their moral and civic responsibility. I can declare, Honourable Minister, that I'm up to date with my taxes. I completed my returns last week, and I want to compliment SARS on an excellent service that they offer us here in Parliament. The VIP unit that we've got here, I think, can be compared with the best in the world. Finally, I want to say, and just to add to what Honourable Kornoff has said, the big question about tax collection is how the money is spent. And what citizens would like to see is value for money. Unfortunately, up to now, when we read reports of the Auditor General and other reports, we do not find that for every 1 rand of taxpayers' money that's collected, we are getting 1 rand spent on the ground. And I think this is an area where Treasury, SARS, and all of us as Parliament must look into, so that taxpayers, when they pay, they know that they are getting a return, not only for their money, but a return for the people of South Africa. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Are there any further declarations? The ANC.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, there are 2 issues in question right now, which makes the DA not to support the rates and monetary amounts amendment bill. Now, I need to make a clarity here. You know, it is about the adjustments for inflation. It is about a retirement fund lump sum withdrawal. Now, the adjustments for inflation, we have, as ANC government, made adjustments since 2009. The problem, Honourable Chairperson, is that it is not according to their percentage, which has to be determined by the DA, not to be determined by the country's need. That's where the problem is. And secondly, a retirement fund lump sum withdrawal. The amendments that we are doing today, if you remember, honourable members, we came in 2009 with these amendments where we were saying from 22,000 rands, if on the retirement, if you want to withdraw, there will be no percentage tax, it will be a non-taxable amount. Now we are proposing on these amendments, we are saying from 315,000 rands. Here we are talking about ordinary workers in the community. We are not talking about the people that are earning the millions and billions. We are talking about the people that are going to gain out of these amendments. People that are going to have and say, I can withdraw 315,000 rands without a tax. And it doesn't say that nowhere in the bill which says that then it is compulsory that you cannot take your money out. But the bill is saying, should you take an amount exceeding so much, taking for an example, an amount exceeding 650,000, you will then be taxed 27%. And what is wrong with that? Since knowing that us as South Africans, we do not have a disciplined culture of saving. So the government has to do something to make sure that our citizens are well looked after working hard. I thank you. The ANC will definitely support this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Are there any objections to the bill being read the first time? There are objections. I will put the question. Those in favour will say aye. And those against no. I think the ayes have it.
House Chairperson, will you record the objection of the Democratic Alliance?
The objection is noted. The Secretary will read the bill a first time.
Rates and monetary amounts and amendment of revenue laws bill.
The Secretary will read the last order of the day.
Second reading debate, rates and monetary amounts and amendment of revenue laws bill.
Are there any objections to the bill being read a second time? There are objections. I now put the question. Those in favour say aye. And those against no. I think the ayes have it.
Please record the objection of the DA.
The objection is noted. The Secretary will read the bill a second time.
Rates and monetary amounts and amendment of revenue laws bill.
The bill will be sent to the National Council of Provinces for concurrence. Honourable members, before we adjourn, I wish to return to the fourth order that dealt with the Protection of Personal Information Bill. The Deputy Chief Whip referred to certain textual corrections which was not read into the records. I wish to do so now. The textual corrections referred to are on page 24 in line 55, to omit subsection 3 and to substitute section 44 subsection 2. That concludes the business for the day and the House is adjourned.